crashes. They figured it out. There was no crashes going to ever happen again. And I just, like, people don't know. They don't know anymore.
Yeah.
Firewall rule not working.
So, did you receive an email from me about this, all of you, about this, what's the thing called? The Rails?
Again?
No, the
Well,
static site generator thing?
Octopress?
Did you receive an email, or
No.
you did?
I got a bunch of emails. I don't know.
I built it on Trusty One.
Huh.
Now I can't figure out how to get it from there onto S3.
Okay. I will.
Generate the static screen site? Static site? That one?
Yeah. Let me open up my own email so I can find out what I sent you. Because what I sent you was,
Octopress on S3?
yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
Octopress.org. Yeah. Source. I guess this updating the virtual machine is like a never-ending game.
You have a utility on there to transfer to the host machine. File transfer. From this machine to the host machine.
Yes, that's called WinSCP.
One STP.
WinSCP. Win Secure Copy.
Or you can use your CyberDuck. You have it already. Use it.
Do we need it for today?
I have
forgot my
FileZilla.
file.
I have CyberDuck.
FileZilla, CyberDuck, WinSCP, lots of tools.
You have a
For Linux or for Macintosh, you don't need this tool. You can just directly access
Yeah.
the VM. Like in Windows, if you want to transfer,
I feel like in the Mac it's easier.
wait till Shahul comes up and he'll give me a hard time.
With this new Mac.
No, he gives me a hard time for certain things. He likes to give me a hard time.
Oh, the Windows stuff? Yeah, the Windows stuff. Yeah, I'm filling out this
Well,
paperwork.
Windows was a real operating system.
I'm filling out this paperwork. Do you have a date stamp? Do you want it like today or back?
May 19th? May 19th?
May
Start date here?
May 19th?
That's the start date, right?
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
So if you had in a virtual box that is running and you show it, what you can do in file transfers is something like this. Like go to Browse Network, and here you will see your underlying physical machine, and just copy and paste from there. So you go like this, Windows Network, and here you will see your own machine showing up. Not in my computer because I don't have Windows here, but you should see Windows machine showing up right there in this box. Do you see that?
No.
You can enable some sharing. Yeah. No, give you a proper Windows username. Is that the proper name?
I'll be back.
Go to workstation, whatever you see there.
Okay. Is
Browse network.
server.
Okay. Browse. And go to Windows Network. And go to, and is that workstation, is that your machine?
No.
Let's see what happens. And public. Is that your machine? Do you have a public folder? Maybe not.
That's not my public folder. No, I've gone through this before. And
I see. So another way to look at it.
that's what I did is I downloaded the utility for VM transfer.
I see.
But the user doesn't have rights to fully install it. You got me locked out. For my own good.
Here's what you can do. With this location.
So I set up a share for that sharing folder.
I heard you say I got you locked down. No, I did not. You have full permissions on the machine. It's your machine. You have complete total permission to destroy yourself if you like.
Okay.
So I don't know what that is. What blocking you is what I want to understand, because I did not prohibit anything. I do give virtual machine primarily to help you, but not lock you. You have root control. So I want to understand where this folder location is.
This is on my
Is that
Windows
something you
machine.
know?
Yes.
Windows sharing folder that you created yourself?
Yes.
Okay. And that should be visible. Is that called the sharing folder?
Yes. I set it up just specifically to test this.
So can we open that same folder from somewhere here?
Sure.
But you don't need an extra utility because the transfer is built into VM through shared folder methods. Just like you're setting it up, it should show up a folder mounted on your VM, and you will just drag it out files.
Are you trying to put an entire folder on
This
S3?
is
Yes.
the folder here.
This is that folder. You drop in a file here, it should show up there after you reboot this machine. The VM, not this VM. If your sharing configuration is correct, this folder will appear in your Finder in Linux.
And how do you do the whole folder?
You move the folder to a utility called S3CMD. That's one utility. That's one way of doing it. There are other ways of doing it, like using CyberDuck, for example. CyberDuck, you can just take the folder and drop it in S3.
But CyberDuck, does it run on?
It runs wherever you have. It runs. I think I'm not sure if CyberDuck is on Ubuntu or not, but let's check. It should be available. CyberDuck. It's probably not on Ubuntu. So Windows and Mac only. But you grab the files, bring it to Windows, and push from Windows. Is one way. If you're already on Unix or Linux, you do use S3CMD and you push it from Unix machine to your S3. That will do. So we'll get to that point right now, as soon as the class starts in 3 minutes. So you did receive an email from me walking you through the steps on. You did not?
I did. I think you did.
She says yes, but I think I'm having issues with my email. That's what it is.
You didn't get one from the static website on the screen?
After our Saturday thing or before? After, no.
But that's the thing that if I'm missing responding your emails, just tell me. I'll tell you the response right now.
I don't know.
If you wrote me an email that I did not respond, first of all, I'm sorry. And second, tell me what it is.
Use software to eliminate that color. And then combine that layers on top, using some kind of Photoshop layering it on top of your background. Yeah. Not bad for my son.
There's so many customers, but if you just want a professional, you can get that.
Mhm.
Yes. Something like that.
Charcoal? I do. I didn't use it.
You sent me something in the email that I responded to you because I had some concerns about the liability on my side. And so that's something we're gonna have to figure out. Okay. Yeah.
Because we want to lock it down quickly.
Okay, now here's the other thing, is the Micro Fry thing is firmed up more. And July and August are clear, but September, they're gonna keep trading this week. So you have to look at.
It's okay, not days. It should not be a problem. I think the conceptual understanding in the that's what I'm talking about. Is when we lock it down, we can, scheduling is not an issue. So, absolutely. I don't see a problem.
Then I'll show you some language in the morning then.
So to recap, I'm going to begin what we discussed the last time we met on Saturday. And what we did was using this static site generator called Octopress. By the way, the reason why, if I may elaborate on this, why do we use static site generators, and what's the point of creating just a static site? Yes.
I'll tell you why. Because I took my site that I generated with WordPress. I thought, I'll just load this over there. Well, by default, it doesn't generate static HTML.
It doesn't.
So there are some ways to manipulate it to turn it into a static site. But after I got looking at a couple of them, you have to jump through so many hoops. And every time you want to reload that site, you have to do the same thing.
Same hoops again.
So then I thought, well, maybe it'd be quicker just to load Octopress, and it was. I mean, Octopress is much more condensed. It doesn't have all the overhead of WordPress. So if we're just doing pure blog, it doesn't generate as much volume of files and so forth.
Yep.
And much more efficient if you're just doing blogs, just doing a static site.
Yes, if you're doing blogs, I think it is one of the most elegant solutions. There are other solutions also available in the Pythonic world called this, Pelican. Like Octopress, like Octopress in Ruby language, there is Pelican in Python. Very similar. I mean, I can even call it almost identical in the concept. Now, when you're running a blog in a regular WordPress site, when I say regular, it actually involves a lot of things. Like you need an OS, a machine, or a host of some sort, right? And then that machine needs to run these kind of a web server, like Apache, for example. It needs some database, and it needs a language, which is this. And so you need to have these things running all the time for it to function. Now, for a rendering of a particular page on WordPress, let's take a live example. Let's go to your site. What's the name?
MorrisonEA.com.
EA.com. If you look at this site and find out the components that are constituting and behind this site, let's go and examine what do we have. So we have a bunch of images.
That's okay. That's okay. Feel free. It's a work in progress.
Yeah, I'm just taking a skeleton example. Like there are some pictures here. You can see some scripts here, and you can see some style sheets. And I'm just, dissecting it as what do we have. So we can see what you show to the world. We're not seeing something that you're hiding. So what we are seeing is, it has some JavaScript elements, some the jQuery is a library, another jQuery form library, the foundation library, placeholder library, modernizer, scripts, and additional scripts that you seem to have put here. And then from styling CSS languages. All these elements essentially are running dynamically every time you type something. Like if you, for example, click this button on, say, contact me, the moment you click, it is giving a call back to the server, generating this page depending on data pulled up from my SQL database and showing it up here. For example,
that page actually works too if you want to try.
Yeah, so you can actually say Nilesh and say Nilesh says hi and hello, and it will actually send that email. So if I send email here, it will send hi message to him, and it says your message was sent successfully. Now this is actually running through a piece of code. I'm guessing it is contact form 7. Is that right?
That's right.
So this is the piece of application that Mel has put inside WordPress that is called contact form 7, for example. Mm-hmm. And installation requires as simple as downloading this and plugging it in this location. Exactly. Simple. Very simple. But this is a piece of code. This code runs when anytime you click this button, the send button, and it shows you a response back. And this action is Ajax, as an example. You got the email.
In my email box.
You got the email saying hi, right? So hi, Shahul. Very good. So we have these. So that's the piece of code that is running on the back end of the machine. In a static site, you don't see that because there is no backend running. There is nothing running on the backside. The contact form 7 that you saw here is actually PHP code running on the back on this infrastructure machine, Apache, MySQL, PHP. That's clear. In a static site, you don't have anything like that. All you have is only the front-end portions. What you have in a static site is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript.
It does have JavaScript, but is that client-side JavaScript only?
Yes, strictly client-side because there is no server-side here.
That makes sense, yeah.
In your PHP example, you have contact form 7. This is using PHP and some JavaScript to say got your message. Like at the end, you have here says your message was sent successfully. This language is coming back to the client, back to the browser through a JavaScript. This part message. Now that interactivity needs to be enabled. You can do that in a static site generator, but then you have to use a third-party tool from somewhere else. You cannot use the built-in site, doesn't help you anything. So you have to use a third-party tool from some other site to give you that back-end feedback to say, yeah, I got your message. Some feedback back to the user. Cannot do that in a plain, simple static site. Not possible, unless you use some plugin. So if all of us have succeeded already in building up our own static site, we can proceed to the next step. Otherwise, I'll just quickly walk everybody through in our virtual machine the same exercise we're trying to do, which is get our static site ready, and then we mount it to AWS S3.
So you're saying the benefit is that you don't really need much stuff to run it, but it doesn't have as much functionality.
Yes, it doesn't do much either. It doesn't do nothing except show what you have.
Yeah.
So what's the point?
It's very efficient.
Speedy, very, very speedy. What else is the point?
It's a lot cheaper to run in an S3
Virtually free.
site than an EC2.
So large. If you have the large sites built on Octopress and Octopress-like infrastructure, but then how do you keep it up? It is static, right? It doesn't change. How do you change?
Uploading the top.
Yes, push again. Like do another write something up, add one more file, create new post, build it and push it, build it and push it. And if you use efficient way of pushing, the tool that I prefer to use is called, where is that? Where's my, here. It's called S3CMD. It's a command line tool. Hi. And this tool is pretty darn helpful in pushing content to S3 from any machine that you have. You familiar with this already? Probably. So this tool is what you can use in Linux. If you have a folder, you want to assign it to a folder and ask the folder to go to S3, it will go using this command.
S3 Express for Windows. Yeah.
Is that open source?
Yes. So this S3 Express is a command line utility, runs on Windows, but I think this, you don't need to use the Windows version because you can use CyberDuck, which you already have. So don't go there. If you are already on Linux, use S3CMD.
So is there, I imagine if you want to just push a new blog, say you're doing a weekly blog and you push it out, obviously there'll be a blog file. There'll also probably be some other files like indexes to that new blog you have to push.
Yes.
You don't have to push the whole site every time.
That's correct. And so S3CMD will push only the references. And so here is how you would in a real life, how would you use Git in conjunction with Octopress is what I want to show now. So the way I want to do is do with you right now in the screen to demonstrate how would a writer create a website, static content using Git and maintain it in a large team. If you have multiple people, writing something, creating a site content using static tools, that's what I want to be doing now. So I'm going to create a folder. I'll call it Morrison EA, for example. Just an example, right? Did I spell it right? Yes. I'm going to go inside. And here, I'll begin our basic steps, is to go to the source code of this Octopress, which is coming from here. Take the link, jump back here, and do a git clone. Clone it locally. So I get the whole package locally cloned. And it's coming down. It's pretty big, apparently, but it is slow. One of these two.
You're cloning it onto your your Macintosh?
Yeah, it's terminal, so it doesn't really matter.
Oh, okay.
All the tools are very similar. I can go to your VM if you like. Just tell me if you want me to go to VM.
Oh, that's fine.
So inside this location, we have a bunch of files. We'll go to tree and say more. And so we have a bunch of files here. You've seen these files already, probably. These are the files inside Octopress.
And that compared to files in WordPress, this is tiny.
I know. So
It took several minutes to copy my WordPress site from one server to my machine, for example.
yep. In the context of WordPress, I recommend using back WP up. Use that.
Back WP up.
Back WP
WordPress
up.
Okay.
So this is a plugin just like your Contact Form 7. It'll back the entire database and your static files and everything and back it up for you and put it in your Dropbox every day. Which is a good idea. Just back up the whole thing. An even better idea is to ensure that the restore works.
Yeah.
You want to actually make sure the restore
I've
works,
worked with a lot of companies that are great at doing backups,
but never test
but they
restore
never test the restores until it's
until
too
something
late.
blows up. Yes, that is unfortunate but true. And the test for backup is actually recovery. How successfully you recover.
Mhm.
And how quickly you recover without bothering your boss.
There you go.
Real bottom line is you don't bother your boss, don't wake them up, don't have him or her wake you up. That's even better.
Yeah.
And if you succeed in that, that's a good backup strategy.
Yeah, we had a bit of a nightmare at Amazon with somebody who had a Bitcoin server
Huh.
that they kept only using ephemeral disk. They didn't use even EBS. And it was one of the outages that we had lightning strike.
Huh.
And so we lost we lost a bunch of hard drives, and we lost power and various issues. And so we rebooted a bunch of machines, obviously. And well, his machine was dead, and he had not backed it up.
Yep.
So, and he's like calling and screaming at us because he has all these customers' Bitcoin. It wasn't as bad as Mt. Gox, but it was a lot of money apparently that he just lost because he's an idiot and because of a lightning strike. So.
Yep. And so here is my memory of Mt. Gox. You see that?
Yeah,
second entry?
you mentioned it last
Second
time.
entry is my Mt. Gox. I have tiny little Bitcoin there.
Not anymore.
Not
That was a big embezzlement scandal.
I don't know what was that, but one thing is that the good thing of the Bitcoin thing was that my son got an internship opportunity to work on the CERN project
Oh, cool.
because he set up a Bitcoin miner in our garage.
Nice.
That was the only good thing about it. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Sounds
it's
cool.
good. It's good. So on this clone that we just got, I'm going to show you the Git status. It's very simple. It is clean. It doesn't say that you have branches clean. What we are doing is making changes to this location. So we'll now observe the changes happening in Git, and you want to see it visually. You can see it in a what was that Tinker Toy game thing that you saw the video on?
Mhm.
So this similar concept you can see in graphics.
That's a real good.
Yes, you can
tool to
see
use
that
for
in here. What is that thing called again? Tinker Toy.
Tinker Toys.
Tinker Toys. You can see Tinker Toys in this area. Conceptually, visually representing the same idea. So in this segment, you see Tinker Toys here, and some developers are working on it already. And we will now begin from here onwards up there, that direction. We'll add step-by-step
I've actually
components.
used Tinker Toys before to show routers, switches, servers
Nice.
for non-IT type people.
Yeah.
And it's so simple, and they get it when they see it in a Tinker Toy.
Yes. So in here we are right now at this location where this guy called Parker Moore, May 23rd, 2014, did some check-in in Git. We are beginning above on top of that. We'll make changes to this Git repository, but we'll show it right here visually so you can see it and immediately relate to it visually. And so the next action from our documentation on Octopress, I think is, I keep forgetting what the documentation says, is initial setup, which basically says you have bundle install is the next step. So we'll do a bundle install and see what changes it does. When you say bundle install, see what changes in Git. Pretty much nothing. But it does change something, and it actually is adding gems. So you see the installing red cloth gem added. All other gems I already had. It added Yaj El Ruby gem. All the white entries you see are added. The other entries I already had rake. It added red cloth. It's using all these other using bundler. Whatever greens are, these gems are now added through the bundle operation. We can go and check in Git what happened there, and there is no new entry. It is still clean. You can go in the terminal and still see the same thing. Status is still clean. We did not change anything materially. Next step will actually make a change. Now we are installing the default Octopress theme by doing a rake install. So we go rake install, and now it did some changes. So what it did is what we want to find out. It created some things. If you go look at visually what changed, there are some uncommitted changes. The new Tinker Toy comes up, and it shows that we have changes. The changes are like this. In the base folder under SAS, there is a new folder showed up with this file. And these are the new files that show up in base. These are the new files show up in custom. Then some sidebar, and some plugins, and some sources. And then there is a post folder. In the post folder, we have some details about what the authors, the layouts, the assets used, and keep going. These are the new elements that got added to a rake operation, which we just did.
Are there multiple styles in Octopress
Yes.
like WordPress?
Yes, you can choose themes. You can install themes inside Octopress, and the documentation will walk you through how to do that. In here, what it did essentially is created a directory called source. It also copied from the themes classic source location, copied into a source folder. It also created a directory called SAS. It copied the themes classic SAS contents into the SAS folder.
What does that SAS stand for again?
In this SAS,
Is
it stands for Syntactically Awesome Style Sheets.
it's like the improved CSS or something.
Yeah, essentially it is CSS. It also adds another folder called source underscore posts. These are the post locations where we will add our posts in what we write. And then there is a folder called public got created, which is the output of the tool, where it will store the output itself. Now going back to our documentation, we will need to now create a post entry, because right now there is no post. We did not write anything. So we'll say rake new post. And in here, we'll say give it a title called hello. And it created something for us. We'll go and examine where it did. So we'll go and look at our source and look at our post, and that's the entry. And in here, we can go even further elaborate. How are you all doing? And save and exit. Now here, we need to now compile and create out of that markdown file. We need to now create HTML, CSS, JavaScript. That creation happens when you do rake generate, which is also some sort of documentation. So going back here in our repository, we do a rake generate. Now observe what it does is creates HTML, CSS, JavaScript right now and saves it. And it does create and put that from the source, compiles it and put that in the public folder.
Does it look at all the files that are
The
in
entire
the
Git
post?
Yes, we'll look at all the post entries. So let's do one more. Rake new underscore post. And I'll call it, what was that twiddly something you had? I twiddly do.
That's
I'm-
good.
Tweedledee
That's
and
good.
Tweedledum.
Twiddly D.
I like it.
Tweedledee, Tweedledum.
I twiddle D. and that's the entry.
Like
So-
Mouse and Wonderland.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I have no idea what that is, but I just like it. So in our source, go to _ post. We have 2 files, and these are the 2 files. There is a _d, I_d, and it says hello Tweedledum. That's the entry. So 2 simple entries, and we are not even writing HTML. We are just writing plain, simple text files. These are markdown files. If you want to do an H1 header, it will go like this. If you want to do an H2 header, it goes like this. This is H2. If you want to do an H3, guess what? It is as simple as that. So it's very simple. This is how I write books, PDFs, or EPUBs. So when you see, I think, a book like this, all of this is written in plain markdown. You saw me writing mathematical expressions. That is also markdown.
Is Markdown unique to Octopress?
Markdown is just like
I'm not-
Word,
I'm not familiar with.
right? So the guy called John Gruber created Markdown. There's this guy called Markdown creator. He is an Apple fanatic. His name is John Gruber, and he created this language. The syntax of plain text with simple additions. The syntax is very,
Kind of
very,
like HTML.
very trivial. It's conceptually HTML, but you write like this, like HTML like this. And so let's save it like this, as is, and now we'll generate again. So we'll do a rake generate. It will generate a new set of public files, put that in the folder, and now we will show it locally on our server. See what it looks like. So it says I want to now present to a port number, 4000. And it tells me that I'm going to use the port number 4000 here up in the upper right segment, and I'm presenting there. So we'll just go to that location and say localhost 4000, and I expect to see Octopress right here showing up. And why is it not? Okay, something else is wrong, but it is showing the title here in the top.
Oh, yeah.
I think it may be firewall. Now, if you look at the content itself, if you go to the source in the public folder, what we have is this location, the public contents of this public folder. Break it, open public, and here you will find your nicely configured set of elements that you want. You want your index.html, which is loaded up, JavaScript's configured, images stored here, blog content posts here, assets here, style sheets here, and site map called out, and robots file also prepared. And you can configure these details the way you like, and you can just open up index.html like this, which has the content, but it's not expressing it form of a website, just opening up the raw file itself. And if you take this content and expose it in a S3 bucket, which will be as simple as this CyberDuck, and then take your S3 content from here, the public folder content from here, and put that in a folder like you may have, for example, say new folder, or I think I need to have the domain control. I cannot do it for your domain. But essentially, if you have a folder that is configured to expose itself as a site, like you already have, with a simple index.html, drop the entire content from this folder, from the public folder onto that site, and it will expose. Right? Do you want to go through that exercise, or you want to move on to the next idea? Do you want to do it here, or move to the next topic? Next topic. Okay. Cool. So now at this point, I want to ask you this question: Is at least some of you told me that you need to speed up to the second month. Is that something we want to start away a little bit sooner than planned? I can do that.
Why are we skipping?
I'm not skipping, speeding up some of the aspects, like some of the things that I think you seem to be comfortable with. I don't want to skip necessarily, but the plan is to go through these services that you see on the screen here. Like understand each one of them in great detail, like we would like to. If that's the choice, we can take that. The other choice that I got feedback that we want to go to speed up to the second month. If that is something that is of more interest, we can do that. You need to tell me.
So, just recap, what is the second month?
Second month is about using operations management, DevOps operations, focusing on using a tool called Chef. This tool is
Automating your deployments.
Yeah, I know what Chef is, but what I'm just concerned with, what would we
lose.
lose to get there? Yeah.
You lose the detail on this. There are lots and lots of new services that have come up. Maybe I should.
You should go over.
I would like to go through it because I'm sure there's plenty that will be just repeat.
Especially if we're doing architecture, the third piece, they're not going to know what to architect.
The third or fourth
If
time.
they don't know
I
what
did it, I might-
if they don't know what
Let's not jump then. Okay, let's stay focused on what we are doing. Is make sure that all of us understand this is the best of breed solution available out there on the cloud today, and we will go into details of these elements. Compare with what Google Compute does,
Azure.
does, and Google Compute Engine does,
Rackspace.
Rackspace does, HP Cloud does, and understand how they are different from each other, which is also useful, I guess, right? Okay. So up until now, we have been focused primarily on the aspects of looking at infrastructure by itself, meaning we looked at, let me get a writing pad. We looked at machines. Like machines, in simple terms, we need a CPU, we need some memory, and some hard disk, some network. This is what we essentially looked at up until now. And we also looked at the other aspects of using S3 as a storage service. Right? We looked at this thing and exposing itself as a method of distribution. There are three methods of distribution. HTTP method, which can download an object. It's an object store, I should call it out. You can expose that object like an HTTP protocol. You can expose that same object over a secure signed URL. So you can limit access to that same object on a time-bound window. Or you can distribute that same object using torrent. Three methods of distribution of the same object that you store in this object store service. If you look now and compare with what other people are doing and providing as services, the other company that does this kind of thing is called Google Storage for developers. And let's look at what they have. If you go and sign up and go to Google Compute, cloud.google.com, you will find that service right here. Similar in concept, but from a different provider. And you will see that. By the way, do you have an account already with Google with $500 free yet or not yet?
I have not signed up.
No hurries, but the idea I want you to take a look at is this element called cloud storage.
How did we get that $500?
She gave you a link.
That's actually, yeah.
Email.
You can also look up,
Starter pack or something.
yeah, it's like
Google search.
startup hack, startup. Google.
So in here is conceptually very similar thing.
Yeah, you don't know.
In Google, and I'm comparing this with what we saw in Amazon S3. There are two side-by-side windows to make it comparable. So Amazon S3 on this side, you saw this already, and on Google's side we have this thing. We'll put it in this side. So I'm doing a comparison between storage, object store service. Between on the left side you see AWS, on the right side you see analogous thing. Very, very similar. You create a new bucket just like that. I call it Moru the Guru. That's the bucket, and it gets created. Now in that bucket I can put objects, just like we did here early on. in the Muru the Guru bucket, I can upload an object, and it says I'm going to say put this shiny picture and upload the object. So it goes, and it shows up there. And the GIF file that I uploaded sits in my Muru the Guru bucket. And if I want to access that same, I can provide a link to this URL, which is private only for me. I need to go and set permissions. So the permission setting will be similar to that. You go object permissions, and you define who can access that object. Conceptually, very, very similar. Only difference is pricing and branding. Concept is same. The protocol is subtly different. The APIs are a little bit different because they want to remain different. Otherwise, it becomes what's it called? Commodity.
Right.
It becomes a commodity if you're not different. So they try to be different from each other, but essentially the concept is you have an object, you store it, you set permissions, you identify who can read, who can write, who can delete, who can modify, who can download.
And that's what's going to run counter to the concept of fungibility.
Eventually, it's not happening yet, but it will eventually happen. And here there are some clear directions to it. Like there is this project called Eucalyptus. And these guys, they are from University of California, Santa Barbara, another open source project. What they have done is API compatible open source AWS. So you run your own private AWS on your own premise using this software. It will behave and function just like Amazon Web Services. No, it's not open.
No, it uses the
AWS.
Amazon APIs.
Amazon API compatible open source.
Is it like a middleware for for infrastructure as a service?
It is the infrastructure as a service, not a middleware. You can use this software, put it on bare bones boxes, and create your own private little Amazon cloud for free. I mean, for free for software. The software is free. You still need to buy machines. But yes, you can do that. Like you have in Expedia, you have private little OpenStack cloud apparently.
So how different this is compared to OpenStack?
This is not OpenStack. This is very similar to Amazon. Very, very similar to Amazon. API compatible, 100%.
So this basically transforms able to create the private cloud inside your premises. Right?
Yes, AWS like private cloud inside your premise.
So it's what OpenStack also does, right?
Yes.
But that uses the OpenStack APIs,
Oh,
not
okay,
the
okay.
AWS.
APIs are different. So if
And the
How
feature
is it
set,
able to copy the AWS?
they made a deal with AWS.
you reverse engineer,
Oh, I see. Okay.
I mean, one, the API is open,
Yeah.
but
like this thing called the file system that Microsoft has called CIFS,
Uh-huh.
right? This has been reverse engineered by this group,
Oh, I see.
right?
Yeah.
This is not
but
Microsoft.
the Eucalyptus one is officially sanctioned
Yes,
by
sanctioned by
AWS.
AWS. But this, by the way, this is also sanctioned by Microsoft. So Samba guys visit Microsoft and cooperate
Okay.
on the SMB protocol. The protocol here is
What it
Yes.
offers to Amazon is Amazon can then say, no, you're not locked into Amazon. You can use Eucalyptus and do it yourself. So they claim, so that way they can claim no lock-in, no vendor lock-in.
So that brings me to a question on transferring files from my Ubuntu server here to my Windows machine. Do I need to run it through Samba?
you can run through Samba. There are several other choices. Samba is the default choice.
Alright.
Samba is the default choice in for connecting, exposing a share to a Windows environment.
It's been around for years.
Right. So Samba is this choice. So that was the Samba answer. Now back to cloud. This thing is AWS compatible private cloud that you can get on your own. If you look at this thing, this implementation is OpenStack, and this is again open source, and you can download this software and run it on your own machines. And when I'm saying machines, you actually get a rack of machines, like a full rack of servers. They call it cloud in a container, or cloud in a box, various names people use. So you go to Dell.com and say, I want to get a cloud, or IBM.cloud, and so here they will sell you a bunch of server hardware pre-configured with some sort of software that will enable you to have your own private cloud.
This is like, what do you call, metal as a service?
Yes, they give you the metal. You deal with it yourself. You know, Dell wants to sell hardware, and so that's what they do is provide you hardware. And so if you go to HP and say, give me cloud, a private cloud, they'll probably gladly sell you. I think this is a new service.
That's their managed.
Yeah.
That's their
It
new
just came up.
cloud.
Yeah.
So they have managed services that provide you private cloud in your company under the brand of HP. So from a fundamental motivation behind HP and Dell and other manufacturers of hardware is that they find that their hardware margins, the price, the profitability is shrinking. So they want to add services on top. So what they do is go actively find and look for opportunities to make money by providing this OpenStack software on top of HP hardware and keep selling and sustain their business by providing services on top as opposed to just giving hardware. And this you see HP Helion is a recent announcement. I think 2 to 3 weeks ago they announced this new service where HP has taken this software, OpenStack, and call it Helion or Helion, whatever the name is. It's the same software. And if you go to
But Rackspace uses it.
Oh.
if you go to hpcloud.com and log in, you will find the same implementation that you would when you log into your console. You will find OpenStack implementation right here. HP is also giving $300 by the way.
So you have your own private cloud in the HP cloud.
So they will bring the box and put
They
it
have
in your
private
building.
and public offerings.
Okay. So can I get like a metal as a service? Can I get bunch of boxes from HP or Dell, and then on the cloud I put my OpenStack and build my private cloud on the public cloud?
Private.
So I just get.
That sounds like a lot of overhead.
Yeah, I get to own the machines, right? I get only the machines from HP.
Oh, you're physically buying machines, and then you're
Not on my
hosting them.
premises.
Then you're hosting them in
cloud.
somebody else's.
Yeah.
So
if
but most clouds won't let you put other boxes in there that they don't own.
I buy HP boxes.
That was
from
a
HP
service.
as a mental health service, and I buy a bunch of boxes, physical boxes.
They won't let you put those boxes in their cloud. They
It
won't let you
becomes
take
your
them to
property.
their data center. You don't have
Mental health
access.
service will allow you to just have them host your boxes.
The way people think about metal as a service can differ from company to company.
Okay.
Right? What I see you want to do is you don't want to really have the hardware in your company.
Yeah.
You don't want that trouble. But
You still wanna own the hardware.
You still want to own the hardware.
It could be profitable. It could be more margin by just having them just host the
Right.
hardware.
And there are
Not
companies
getting
that do that. They call it colo,
Okay.
co-location. So
Yeah,
you
that's
bring your
technically
hardware.
Exodus and Internap and everything. You go throw your boxes at their data center.
So now
They
you
hook
so
up the
now
network.
you're basically renting their space and asking them
But
to manage your
Amazon
hardware.
and Azure and stuff don't let you put anybody else's boxes. They don't let you put physical boxes in their data center. You don't get access to the data center. You know, with
Rental means you just still need to manage the space, power.
Which is not what you want to do, right?
Yeah,
The idea is you don't want to do waste of time, waste of money.
That's how Rackspace got started. I assume they still have.
Exactly.
That's
The
right.
idea is they give you space on the rack. That's where the word rack space comes from. Is you have a space, little space, they rent that space for you, and now they, over time, migrated to a situation where they were not just renting the space, but also renting the rack itself. And now all cloudified, so you can access these machines through API.
Right.
And spin up, down, delete, destroy, create new ones. And OpenStack, like HP, this interface you see, HP Cloud is OpenStack implementation in the brand name of Helion or Helion. What do you call this thing?
Helion.
Helion. So Helion, and let's look at what Rackspace does. Rackspace.
So if you think about the security things, that like if Amazon owns the data center, if they allow customers just into the data center, like
No.
a colo facility, they wouldn't be able to get all the government level tiered PCI and all those level security because they have to run like NSA level and FBI level checks on the people that they employ at the data center. They can't. It doesn't work.
Yep. So here is a different look and feel of the same implementation, OpenStack again, but looks different. The implementation here is you create a server in Rackspace, and you get to choose in Chicago or Sydney or Dallas or Hong Kong or Northern Virginia, choose an image you want, Windows or some previously saved, or Linux versions you can choose Debian, Trusty, and go. So a different type of UI, the same thing. You put a server name, compare that with HP. Let's see, we have, we want to create a machine. We'll go and create, where is the machine created into? Compute instances. Okay, here, US East, compute instances. So I will click on that and say launch instance. And it is supporting, but this is supposed to be, yeah, there it comes. So choose any availability zone, give it a name I like, and choose the size I want. Choose a standard large and boot from source. So I have either preserved image or just not use these, but instead choose an OS. Where do I choose the OS? I will access and security, the same concept of a key pair. You add a key pair here, give it a name, and paste the public key here like this, right? Cancel out, and back to details. You can select a source and say boot from an image, and then it will select the image you like. You get to choose what images you want, and there are some standardized choices: CentOS, Debian, SUSE Linux, Ubuntu Lucid, and Ubuntu Precise, and Windows servers. And then there are other images also available like this one. But they call it the partner image, meaning they did not create themselves, as somebody else did for them.
They're not responsible for it.
It's like saving your skin, but putting the word partner there.
It's the same thing as Amazon Marketplace.
Yep. Somebody else is responsible. If something goes wrong, call them, not me. So the idea is very, very similar in all these varieties of that you see in HP Cloud versus Rackspace. Concept is identical. Same principles apply, that you have a key-based access. You inject the private, keep the private key private, inject the public key into those machines, and you can access these machines just like that, just like we did before.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
On Google Storage for Developers.
Yes.
Does it have a feature to serve HTML, CSS?
It does not.
It's unique to AWS right now?
Unique to AWS right now, but I hear these guys are coming up. Dreamhost.com is coming up.
Wow.
The login. Hope I have login there. Login. Okay, I'm not authorized. This IP address. Okay. So I should go and check my email. We'll get an authorization request there. Yeah, it'll come. There'll be an email that comes that will let me authorize this location because I'm not authorized to access my own cloud from this building. I can only do it from my home. Yes.
So Rackspace allows you to create a private cloud in their space, right? They host the servers and the private cloud, and no one has got access. It's a shared, it's a secure network, and you can access.
Mm-hmm.
Does Amazon?
Everybody, yes, everyone also does that.
Oh,
So,
everyone does
yeah,
that.
everyone does that. They will do it like this. So we go to Amazon and look at what they have. Where is Amazon? Amazon is
They just use a VPN.
here. So here,
Oh, okay.
let's go look at what they
So you
offer.
access it in the back instead of the front.
Oh, I see. Also, you have a VPN into it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or you create a direct link, and even then you might tunnel through the direct link.
So here is the way to get that.
So the public, there's no concept of public address exposed.
Right.
Or you
If
direct
you're
access
using the
server.
VPN. If you're going without the VPN, then you go to the front door.
Got it.
Virtual private cloud. It is private, but not in your building.
Yeah. All it really means is
And so
you
just
just access you access it through the back door instead of the front.
You're still, it's not,
Has to
it's not dedicated hardware though.
No,
can be not this offering, but
Not
it
this-
can be
not this
dedicated for you.
it's like
government
$10
has.
an hour though for dedicated hardware on Amazon. It's retarded.
Yes.
They really don't
Yes.
want to do it.
If you go in Globe, I used to have actually the enterprise region. Let me go to the other EC2. You can probably see a dedicated region. I used to see that in this drop-down list. I used to see GovCloud, government cloud used to show up.
No, you can't. You don't qualify for GovCloud. That's
I was able to, and that's why I was like trying to see if I still have. I do not. In this drop-down, you can select your GovCloud, which is a dedicated cloud for CIA.
They can't.
I had that. So I was like seeing if I can show it to you, but no, I don't.
Maybe you.
But you can get a dedicated instance in any other one of the things. It's an option under when you create a new instance, and we'll let you choose a dedicated instance, but your price goes from like 2 cents an hour to like $10 an
Yeah,
hour.
and we can
But
choose.
GovCloud, government restrictions on that were all the boxes had to be dedicated.
So the comparatively, when I look at the Rackspace versus the cloud versus the Google versus AWS, I think AWS got much more features
Yes.
like Redshift,
No doubt about it.
DynamoDB.
They've been
No
doing it
doubt
for
about
7 years
Yeah.
versus everybody else
They're
is
just
like
trying to
2
catch
or
up.
3,
Yeah.
4.
So if you want a full-blown functionality end-to-end business, makes sense to go for Amazon versus going to the developers.
Indeed. If you want feature set, probably it's a good idea to go your Amazon.
But you need real administrators as well. If you want people that are kind of, we want a business, and then we might have some guy who's my cousin, they kind of run the website. You don't want to use Amazon.
Yeah. I'm talking about a couple of hundred employees.
Yeah. So Dream Object, these guys. Again, very similar offering. They also offer the Rackspace style of accessing storage, as well as the Amazon style of accessing storage by calling it something different. They have a different nomenclature. The Swift here. These two ways of accessing the same object through 2 different methods. One is the S3 style, which there is a key, and in Swift is the storage solution for your OpenStack. So OpenStack has a variety of components like you see here. The classic 3 components. There is a compute element, there is a networking element, and there is a storage element. The storage software in OpenStack is called Swift, and they have implemented, DreamHost has also implemented the same OpenStack, and they expose it like this here. And so you can access these buckets. These are the bucket names that I have in this particular location. And you can, of course, create a new user or create a new bucket. Like add a bucket and call it Mel Morrison. And mark it private or open it, make it public, and add a bucket. And put in go to that bucket inside, view objects in the bucket, and make it a little smaller. Go to Mel Morrison bucket and upload an object to it. Select a file.
It's founded by MUD graduates.
Why would you choose this site over another?
Cheaper.
Okay.
DreamHost has been a classic old-time shared hosting company, like Bluehost or DreamHost. They're modernizing themselves to become cloudified, if I may say that word. And so they're picking up OpenStack. They're contributing to OpenStack also these days. They're modernizing itself. That's the summary. They're trying to create new services at a cheaper price. And if you have been a customer of theirs, it's a good idea to use cloud services from here. They have just 2 things right now. On the left pane, you will see that they offer Dream Object, which is an object store, and Dream Compute, which I'm not yet entitled to. Because
Well,
it's,
sort of.
yeah,
Enter your
well,
beta.
sort of. Enter your beta code. So I'm not a party into that. I'm not in that game yet, but they're building it up.
Is that infrastructure as a service?
Yes, exactly. The name says compute, right? So it will be like EC2 conceptually. So this is coming up in the industry, but this is like a baby compared to everybody else. Just ignore the baby for now. In Rackspace and HP Cloud, you see what you see, what looks like different, but underlying is OpenStack. This is what you see. In another company, I think there is a whole list of companies that participate in OpenStack. We should go to that location, the foundation. And there are big name people that are on this. So let's see who are on the board of directors. Yes, this use Mirantis again, Red Hat, Pentaho. This Chris Kemp, I don't know what his company is. She's an HP person, Intel person, Canonical, which is Ubuntu person, Piston Computing person, Cisco person, and we have folks from NASA on this. Red Hat person, HP person, cloud scaling person, Dell, Yahoo.
Did NASA contribute to the original version of this?
Mm-hmm. And we have this CERN, the Switzerland laboratory that is trying to find God particle.
Mm-hmm.
God particle. Then we have AT&T, and IBM, and Aptera, and Rackspace, and Haze, and Moon, and Nebula, Nun, and 99 Cloud. So lots of folks behind this, and it's evolving nicely. So it is a alternative solution to AWS, which is what most other companies that are not AWS are trying to adopt, trying to put efforts together to create their own version of software that gets show up in the business like this one, like what you see, Helion, showing up here. Concepts are very, very similar. You can manage your access keys, you add your keys, create a machine, create a storage object, share that object through a variety of different methods. Not all providers will support all methods. Like nobody does torrent distribution except Amazon yet. But Eclipse, sorry, not Eclipse, Eucalyptus will do it because it is API compatible. So they will implement it. The challenge with using Eucalyptus is that you have to now deal with your hardware. So if you have IT staff that is accustomed to managing and maintaining your own hardware in your company, and now you want to be able to reach a point in your organization where you want to provide IT as a service. Like we talked about the other day of example of King County government. They have an IT team. The primary function of that team is to provide services to their employees, and they treat their employees as their customers. So here is a way of offering a service. In your organization, you offer a service that I offer, like in Expedia's example. You probably have access to a bunch of machines through an automated framework that you can, Shahul will say, I need a bunch of machines. He can probably get them by click a few buttons or running a command somewhere. And that service is being offered to him through IT. I don't know whether you work for IT or you consume IT.
I work for IT.
You work for it. So he's probably giving these services to business units within his company that particular business entity might need. Give me 20 machines so I can run my Hadoop cluster. And so he needs to be able to provide that service, but he does not want to wake up in the middle of the night doing that. So what he will do is automate that for them. And so the automation would involve him writing some code so that on demand any user group, like say marketing in Expedia wants to get machines, 20 machines now. Okay, click that button and get your machines. They'll get configured to you, you'll get your keys, your operating systems loaded, your application loaded and up and running, and you can start using it in 10 minutes without waking up Shahul because he's in Hawaii, for example. So why not? So the idea essentially comes down to the fact that what's wrong with Hawaii?
Yeah. Everybody wants wishing to go there. Just go there.
What's wrong? So be in Hawaii. Why? The idea behind our this course essentially is to automate stuff, and we'll do that very slowly, step by step, to understand how we actually automate things for our customers. And when I say our customers, essentially I think of it as we are IT department providing services to our internal company employees of a variety of different types. Like the customer service unit wants some services from us, we can provide them the infrastructure they need, the support they need for their development, the support they need without actually involving hands-on, because the thing should be automated. That's the underlying idea we want to get to. So if for example, a particular case of a, let's say, somebody wants to run a PHP stack, a complete LAMP stack. What they would expect you to do is they give you your code, their code. Let's say in your company, I think Robert Half, is that where you work? So Robert Half wants to have a bunch of new hires they want to get on board, and they need some software that is written in PHP, for example. They have an application already for internal human resources app. Let's take a fictitious example. And they want that application to be deployed on a bunch of machines so that their internal employees can consume it, which basically boils down to setting up at least one machine to start with all the requirements that are needed to run a LAMP application correctly. Which basically means that without bothering him, a customer of his, which is inside his company, should be able to provision an entire machine running their own in-house application on a cloud, whether it's internal cloud or public cloud or whatever cloud, doesn't matter, but some set of machines somewhere in the cloud, configured without his personal involvement. Of course, he's there, but that should happen automatically through a programmatic method. To enable that, there are things that need to be in place to make it happen, and those elements is what this course, that at least the second month of the course focuses on, is to automate that stuff. So we need to be able to provision what we need to create for our customers by defining what I call a desired state. Not defining how to do it. Not this. This. So we define what is the desired outcome you want, and then you write code in a language that you choose, either Chef or Puppet or whatever other tools. But you define the desired state and let the machines handle themselves. An example I gave, I think, in the last time was to have a JEOS, which is like the basic unit of a machine that you inject a DNA or a fingerprint or a policy or how the outcome should look like, and this will become the animal you want. If you inject the DNA for, say, a lion, it becomes a lion. If you inject the DNA of a giraffe, it becomes a giraffe. But because this JEOS is like the embryo. So whatever DNA you inject, the outcome will take that shape. So if you want a MySQL server, what you essentially do is inject the MySQL cookbook in simple terms. And then you get a result which is a MySQL server. And if you want to have an Apache server, what you use is Apache cookbook and configure it. And so you want to define what the desired state is, what you want. And you identify these steps that are needed to enable that desired outcome. And then you move away from it, because then that will take care of itself. It is a self-healing, self-correcting system that you want to put in place that will run itself periodically and bring the state back to the desired state, even if there is a person somewhere in your organization that decides that, you know what, I want my HTTP traffic to not run on port 80, but I want to run it on 8080 because that's what I want. He just chooses that. You know, it's not illogical to think like this. Somebody might think that I want not to use SSH port number 22, but a different port because it is more secure. So I'll use port number 23042. That's the port I want to use. And the admin decides that. But this organizational policy doesn't allow that. But this dude apparently did some changes, and so you don't know which server he made those changes on out of the thousands of servers you have. And so how do you keep track of these things? That's the element we'll get to pretty soon. This is think of it as an automated method of keeping track of what you have in your IT policy that you define, and you define a desired state and you enforce it. And even if somebody by accident or by malicious intent changes something, it will correct itself and brings things back to order the way you want, the way you define.
So I'm sorry. No,
Go ahead. Well, my question was, can you build this entirely in Chef or Puppet, or do you need to add additional scripting in PHP or something? Do it all,
All
the
Ruby.
whole thing in
All Ruby. Then most of it is already done, by the way. It's the-
cookbooks, yeah.
most of it is done. It's for us to understand how to pick the right components and put that in a proper order so that we can accomplish our outcome. We don't have to reinvent wheels, new wheels. It's already invented. We just know how to make use of it. And that's what we will get to pretty soon.
So can we
Yes.
use Chef to create the backup copies of different desired state, for example, making a release 5. Okay, Chef takes a copy of release 5 and release 5.1, 5.6, etc. And you can roll back in state at any point in the future.
Yes, so the way you deal with that problem is by using Git. And you define, like in source code, like we saw here, right? Let me show you. In here, what you see, where is that? Oh, not here. Not here either. Okay, actually, you can see here. So I'm changing these nodes as I walk up the tree. The Tinker Toys are changing because my content is changing. So it's like a version in Git as I commit along. Right? Let us give you a practical example, like we were doing on this Octopress thing in this folder. So right now, if I do a Git status, I have lots of things called S. These two new entries are untracked. So I will go git add dot, and then git commit new posts added, and then I say git status. It's clean. So I go and look at the picture, how it shows, and it says new post added. See, I see a new entry there. A new Tinker Toy comes up. And so now this is my version 2 or version 3. So I can go back here again and say rake new underscore post and say this is my third post. So I created a third post. Now in my Git repository, what I do is status showing something new. And see, this thing is new, it's untracked. So I want to add that, git add, and say git commit, and third post. And now go see I see the third post, new Tinker Toy shows up, right? So anytime I am making a change in my entire infrastructure of Blueprint, I will design and write code to that and put in Git as a repository in a safe location, so I can revert back to wherever I want.
But then for a complex applications, like you have multiple database servers, you are making hundreds of schema changes plus middle tier changes plus network changes plus all these infrastructure code changes, database changes you're making to release a functionality. That's not like a small file changes. Right? You have entire infrastructure or application code is changing. So you want to revert back to the previous configuration.
Yes. So you talked about two different things in subtly. You mentioned schema changes.
Yeah.
You also mentioned configuration changes.
Yeah, it could be a code change in the web servers.
Code changes.
And I may be doing some network changes in order to enable some functionality of this application. So I'm changing the entire stack, not release a new functionality. Now, if something goes wrong, I don't want to bring my application down for another 10 hours to roll back all the changes.
Yeah. So the way to deal with this problem of complexity is to have separation of it's called separation of concerns. Right? There are people who will do schema changes, that typically database architects, who will structurally change a database schema. Not the IT guy will not disturb a schema in an application. You agree? The IT guy who is providing us infrastructure will not typically change the database.
The database is also part of the IT team also, right?
Okay. Okay, then that's a different personality of a different person type that deals with this change. So it's separation of concerns and have them maintain their database schema changes so that the application that are being developed using that schema take into account what changes are. Having these changes isolated in broad buckets helps understand how are we dealing with these changes in a sense. Let's look at the code change. The code developers are changing some PHP code somewhere, for example. That's a change in their Git repository for the code, the application itself. When it's a configuration change or a network change, let's say you're changing some port or some
Adding new firewall tools.
yeah, adding firewall tools or those type of the configuration in the IT side of things as opposed to the application side of things. The idea behind Chef would be to deal with infrastructure code. Not necessarily a code itself for the application.
But can we not use code also?
Yes, you
in
can.
Chef? Okay.
Yes, you can,
Okay.
but don't want to. You want to keep it separate.
Okay.
Like in a very another type of example, you see this WordPress.org has the software, right? It contains the software itself. So you can download the entire package from this website, WordPress.org, and then you can start customizing it. It is downloadable right from here in this location. You take that down, and once it comes down, you put that in a Git repository, and now you make changes to it. When you make changes, these are code changes. They do not really depend on the underlying infrastructure. Can be whatever you want or need. The infrastructure changes can be different from the code itself.
Not the example which I was trying to give, right? Because for a sequence of events needs to happen A to Z. One is middle of it is infrastructure change, and then like maybe E is infrastructure change, and F is a code change, G is some schema changes, then O is some other infrastructure changes. So what I'm trying to understand is when this kind of a complex release is happening, how we want to quickly roll back to the previous condition without having to come back to this.
Yes. So I think I understand it better. Let me draw a picture on the screen so I can show you a point.
I also need snapshotting capability for each one of those pieces.
But some of those things you don't have snapshotting.
Right.
But it depends on.
So the way I would deal with this problem is like something like this. You have different types of people working in a branch. So you have main Git repository containing all of your code and all of your infrastructure and your database schema and your network elements, all of that. But in Git, you have this concept of creating branches. Typically, development goes in what I call a master branch. And everybody essentially, even though they offshoot from it to begin with, and I go work on my work, take an offshoot and work on something like network elements. In this guy working on some PHP code, for example, they eventually need to merge together into a common location here. And that merger happens, and this is what eventually after testing you get to a release branch. So if you make it a little smaller, there's the tool set there. If you look at the same branching structure that we just discussed, there are multiple types of branches. You can call it the release branch, the master branch, the PHP code branch, the network branch, and every team can have their own branches, all tracking a common release that goes to the customer. You have to have a method of releasing your code, your infrastructure changes, your network changes, your database changes in a streamlined fashion by putting everything under some kind of a revision control like Git. So anytime you make a change, you need to have internal meetings that, I made some changes here. I need that change to merge all the way to the master branch, test it out thoroughly, and then go do a release. And then whenever I release, I know what I released, because the previous release I can always revert back to. Right? Mm-hmm. So this is how I would structure a large Git repository of a major project. If you have multiple people working on a variety of pieces of the same thing together, the release has to be very disciplined carefully, because all of these components need to merge into a common, sorry, not in the release branch, but in the main location. You need to have a merger point in the main branch and have everybody sign off. And there may be more teams doing other changes to the application, the overall release of that service that you have going to your customers. So you want to have each one of them essentially tracking towards a release goal. RELEASE. So you have a release goal of maybe every month, every week. You track that by number 1, number 2, and I want to target that release. Internally, there is a master release across the company that you want to release, master. And then various teams have copies of the same thing taken that they work on, and they will merge to the master at some point, maybe every Wednesday. You decide when you want to merge, and you test this one thoroughly before you let this one go here. And if something goes wrong in this segment of the process, something went wrong here, you can always go back to the 0 from 1. That's the most elegant way to track any changes, because now you know this was a point in time good snapshot here. At this time everything was okay, but now you pushed this change, which includes either this or this or this. One of these guys made a mistake. You don't know who did, so you can quickly roll back here and go back to square one and fix it, and then continue a development cycle like this, and merge on point number 2 here, and then when you think everything is okay, then you switch, then you jump. This is a way to handle, but you need to have every single change you do across the board in Git control, like we just did with these pictures that I showed you. In here, we saw this third post showing up and the new post added showing up. That we are building up our branches, building up our nodes as we keep adding content to our Git repository. And you can see that these 2 dots went outside from the main branch and then came back here. That's a branching and merging action done by Brandon Mathis on March 9th, 2014. And this is this guy's picture. You can essentially identify who did what, who changed what, at what point in time, go back to that change, and we can revert to that point in time by right-clicking and checking out, and then pushing it out in the cloud. That change will go out, and everything above that is gone. We don't care.
In a typical organization, who would be in charge of managing the Git repository and various?
I think it's the CEO, because his butt is on the line if something goes wrong. Honestly, it is Jeff Bezos is not going to do it.
Right.
But he can.
The dev manager.
He is a technically capable person.
The product manager or the dev manager is usually the person who is.
The release manager is typically used in some companies use it.
You have a release manager.
You have to have a person who is responsible for what is going in the release branch. Every branch in Git will have a person who is managing that quality of that code in that branch. Yes.
Well, I was just going to ask, were you wondering though, like in a rollback scenario, so all of that, the code's been deployed, like let's say the release was at 10 p.m. at night, everything's deployed, all the changes are made, and at 10:30, it's discovered that all the code that was deployed was a problem, and you're saying, well, how do we roll back to? How do we roll back to?
That's what I was wondering. Like Jeff, you can have. I'm not sure. I'm not playing with Jeff a lot, but you can. I'm wondering if you can create a sequence of events. Okay, do this first step, second step, so when you need to roll back, just issue a command in Jeff, which goes in the same reverse order sequence to get back to the old state for the entire application stack, without having to someone, okay, you go to purpose tree here, you go to purpose tree here, copy the bits here, copy the bits here. That will take long.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. And does the Amazon allows you to take some snapshot, because sometimes you can take a snapshot before the release and then you put
Yes.
the snapshot. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Everybody will do that same thing. So I'll give you an example of the snapshot I took before the class. I think I did that already.
Yeah, we did that for.
Every provider will let you do a snapshot.
You call it a snapshot.
Do you charge for that, or
Yes,
Purchase
for storage.
just for the storage?
Yes. Charge for
You need
storage.
Okay.
And if you keep like your most recent one like within EBS next to your live,
Yeah.
and then keep your several versions back in S3, so it's cheaper.
Okay, makes sense.
And so here, create a snapshot. For a live running app, you can just create a snapshot like this with a single button. And if you have an instance running, it will take the replica of the instance. If you want, and you can push this out to
S3.
S3, and even cheaper than S3 is this element that we haven't discussed formally yet. I think we should. It's called Glacier. It's a cold
For
storage.
Archivo?
Here.
Is it for archive purposes?
Yes.
Okay.
It is, think of this thing which is coming up. It's called Glacier. It is supposed to be big and supposed to be slow.
Like a tier 3 storage.
Yes, kind of tier 3. And it is really, really, really cheap.
The way that it basically functions is that they have just these racks just filled with hard drives, not tape, it's actual hard drives, but they turn off a portion of the hard drive, or drives. And so then when you request, I want my data back, they have like we'll give it back to you in like 4 to 6 hours, but often it's much quicker than that. They basically will turn those drives on when it's convenient. There's enough requests for that section of the drives to come on, and then you'll get access to your data.
What are you using? So what I'm going to show you is this how I use this cold storage. So my pictures, about 300 to 400 gigabytes of storage, sits in my hard drive in my FreeBSD, which you heard of me already saying. So from there, it will replicate that over to Glacier. That's where it goes and sits. And
so it's technically cold storage. That's why
yes,
it's
so it takes forever to even synchronize. So it took like 10 seconds for it to synchronize all the backups. The last backup was apparently done on June 7th, which is 2 days ago. So the entire photo library, which is about 300 to 400 gigs, is backed up in Glacier, and I pay $1 for a month.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's really cheap.
And you can set up an aging
Yes.
in S3. So if you put your snapshots automatically, your first 2 of your snapshots to EBS. So if you need to roll back, you can do it quickly right from EBS. And then you age those out into S3. You can set a policy in S3 to automatically age, anything over 3 weeks or 2 weeks or whatever into Glacier.
Oh, okay.
And here,
And then you can also have it time out, delete them after a while.
That's nice.
and so here 375 gigs of storage for $1 from this
Wow.
application that
So
you
it
can
creates a
see,
nice little sequence of,
and you can match the
Completely
UUID.
automate the
Yeah.
data movement.
absolutely.
Yep. So, go.
Do you run any kind of checksum to verify, when it's moved from your storage to like a Glacier?
Every time anything moves, and mark my words, every time anything moves, it's a great idea to do a check of some sort. Absolutely great idea, and all software worth their salt will do it by default. It's a no-brainer. You have to do it. Every time you move something from, even if you don't move, they'll still do a checksum on non-moving data. And Amazon will improve this 11 nines numbers. Where does it come from? Essentially from the fact that even if the data is not going away or just staying there, they'll just go and check what the checksum was before and after now. And if there is a difference, they'll try to regenerate the data and correct it and heal it. If the healing fails, they'll say, I'm sorry, I failed. And that was the case of that 1 9 out of the 11 nines. The failure point, a very tiny little fraction of failure. That might happen because it's not 100%. It's only so many nines, not infinite nines. So failure will happen, but failure will minimize through constant scrubbing of your own data, even if you're not moving it. So this checksumming of variety of different types, a simplest example that you saw me doing MD5 checksum or SHA-1 checksum. There are more complex methods of doing these checksums, but anytime data is there, you need to do a checksum on your own. And the ZFS that I mentioned before does checksums on your hard disk by itself. Even your PC hard disk will do some basic checksums already. On your own, Windows will do it, Linux will do it, Mac will do it. Everybody does it by default. It's assumed that you're doing it. And some companies actively advertise that they're doing it to claim leadership in the space of S3 and Glacier, for example.
And even EBS, they write to 2 disks, do the checksums, and then they return. Then before they return and say, "Yep, we wrote it to disk." It actually writes to 2, does the checksum, and then it returns the, "Yep, it's saved."
So it's a given. Now we talked about the services that we are discussing here, which is the storage and content delivery that we're focusing on. Primarily on S3, we talked in great level of depth. We actually used it. We just mentioned Glacier, and what is going on from an economic perspective here is that Amazon has been in business for so many years. I think I have an Amazon account when I was in India.
96 or 97?
Yes, 97 is when I bought a book.
No, 96 then.
And when I was in Bombay. I bought a book in Bombay on how to get into an MBA program. So that book I already have, still have, and I have my receipt from those days, 97.
Well, now you can get a digital copy of it for only $2.
Is it?
Well, anything you bought in
Right,
physical
right.
books, you can now get a
Books
Kindle
of
version of
music,
it.
yes, Kindle version.
You can get your digital copy for like $1.
Yes, so I should do that. Yeah, any supported
almost,
book.
As long as they have it in digital form, which they
Yeah.
almost have everything in digital form. But yeah, any book you've already bought through them, you can go back to that book, sign into your account, and it will say, "Do you want to download the digital form for $1?"
For $1. So it's a good thing. Now, what they do with these older machines and older hard disks that they had forever with Amazon.com, and then since then, for last 6 or 7 or whatever years, Amazon Cloud, is that they have older hardware. They have conveniently deployed that older hardware as Glacier.
Actually, that's not true.
Is it not true? Then where is the old hardware going?
I don't know where the old hardware is
It's
going.
not showing on eBay.
But what they did with Glacier is they couldn't actually make the numbers work right and be cold enough and not too heavy if they used the older hardware. And so what they did was they actually worked with Western Digital to create a custom hard drive just for them that works in this particular way. And then they designed a custom cooling system that is just for this giant rack that's enclosed of hard drives. And
Anything custom to me sounds like more money.
well, what they did, it's still kind of private, but this is what they told us
Okay.
internally, and they had the guy who engineered it, Hamilton, whatever his name is, the guy with crazy frizzy blonde hair. Whenever he talks at anything, you have to go hear him because he's amazing. And yeah, he basically designed the whole thing. But that's kind of why no one else has Glacier, because the economics don't work out so well. Anybody can, throw a bunch of hard drives in a thing and hope they don't turn off. Or turn off half of them.
Yeah.
But this is
So
a
then how
different
do you
thing.
give away? Right? Give away value like this at a throwaway price.
Yeah.
And how do you remain in business for so long?
Well, that's
Is the question I do not understand. So my gut is, from an economics perspective, I think they're using old hardware. Maybe I don't know.
not for Glacier, but for EC, for EC2, yeah, absolutely. I mean, why do you think you only get 1 gigahertz? I mean, they have just all their machines and all their ephemeral disks. Those are all just. I mean, they have some SSDs, but all that stuff. I mean, they add. What is it? They add
I think they
as
added
much. They
new
add as much
machines.
new data center equipment as they do every day as when it was only a $7 billion business.
Only.
As much as they needed to run the whole $7 billion business, they add that much stuff a day to AWS.
The SSD-based images, these instances have come up recently. They were not
Yes.
there initially.
Yeah, all the old stuff
SSDs.
is still
And so the older
That's all
machines
this-
are.
all their old stuff.
So that was the. So there's one more thing in storage, I think, which is.
Yeah, the storage gateway.
Okay. So from the name of it, what do you think it is? What do you think this is doing? They describe the whole thing. So I guess you can read. Bad question.
So where is EBS up there in the services?
Think of EBS as hard disk attached to your CPU.
Right.
as opposed to storage as a service, which is not attached to your CPU, but it's a file system away from your CPU. Think of it as network attached storage in the context of machines, that you can put an object somewhere, access it through program, through an API call, recover it, retrieve it, delete it, create, read, modify, destroy. You can do these operations on objects away from your local hard disk, and think of EBS as your local hard disk.
You're unlikely to have an EBS sitting around with stuff on it, not connected to compute. Whereas S3, you can have operate without compute.
Think of EBS as boot drive.
Okay, it sounds like EBS is for live production for
C drive.
high speed.
C drive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's for running databases, applications.
Tier 1
The
storage.
question is, I don't see it up there in storage and content delivery.
It's not available as an item. You cannot get an EBS without a CPU.
Yeah.
So it's a
It runs
add
the
on to
You have to go to compute because it only hooks to a computer.
Yeah.
You cannot say, give me a disk.
So when you choose EC2, it will let you choose
Yes.
what type of storage you want.
Yes,
Yeah.
that is correct. But you cannot get, hey, I just want a disk and do nothing with it. That's not an option. If you want to do nothing with the data, just store it, you go S3.
And then you don't need a faster storage like
Yeah.
for storing the files.
SSD. You don't need SSD for S3.
You know the difference between block and file storage? Block and file? You heard of the difference between block and file storage?
Yeah.
So file storage is EBS, block is S3. That's the other difference. There's actually a file system on EBS. There's not a file system. You can't mount S3 without some weird serious hacks. You can mount an EBS drive.
Oh, by the way, can you mount an S3 on a...
Yeah,
Yes.
you can. It's
Yes.
hacky. It's really
Yeah,
hacky.
the
You can
open
use like
source.
Gluster or whatever to create a file system on it
Okay.
and then mount it.
Oh, okay.
Just Google mount S3.
Okay.
You can find ways to do it.
So can you find
She's talking about this thing.
cluster?
Gluster. It's a file system that can run on S3 in your bucket. It's ugly and it can be a little slow.
So
But
let's
it's
see.
reliable.
Yeah.
So this will be useful for the scenario. You have a large database. You backed up a month back.
Exactly.
And for some reason you restore
This
it.
is the cluster.
Yeah.
Cluster is used in Hadoop, for example.
Yeah, yeah.
Cluster-like systems are used in Hadoop.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And do you have a fast like what do you call SSDs in the
SSDs for EBS, yes.
Yes,
Here.
You also have something called provisioned IOPS. If you
Oh, I see.
if you actually need not only SSD, but you need to know specifically how many you want to be able to say, I need this many IOPS consistently. I don't have an application that just kind of goes up and down, and it doesn't hit these crazy peaks. If it hits crazy peaks, you might need to do provisioned IOPS,
Got
which will allow you to go up and stay at like 100 IOPS per second, operations per
So
second.
they decide what storage they want to put. You just specify what IOPS
You
want.
pay, then they give you more
Yeah, you
IOPS.
say I want SSD, you say I want IOPS of this much, and they'll manage how it all connects.
Okay, makes sense.
So if you pay more, they give you more IOPS.
So if you have a really sensitive, high transaction database, provisioned IOPS is what you want.
They might give maximum of 4,000 IOPS.
Yeah, and that keeps going up. When I was there, it was like 1,000.
Okay.
And what's crazy is it totally is. Like you test it and you hit it, what's your IOPS? What's your IOPS? What's your IOPS? If you do it on regular EBS, it's like, I'm at 100, I'm at 1,000,
Yeah.
I'm at 4. And you do it on the provision one, it's like, I'm 4,000, I'm 4,000,
How
I'm
fast
4,000.
The EBS is depends on how hard the storage is, right? Neighbors are
And the network.
And the network.
And the network, whereas the provisioned IOPS has a special network just for it.
Oh, okay.
So it's a separate thing. So it's the network and the storage together
Got
that
it.
make it happen.
So if you look at this chart or this representation in the console, you will find that they have bucketized their elements or their services in these 5 buckets. The upper left corner talks about anything to do with computation.
Mm-hmm.
The bottom left corner is about storing stuff. Stuff as in files, objects, things. Right? The middle upper column is about storing data in a structured format either a Mongo style format or a relational database format. Both these are options available.
I'm surprised they don't have a Hadoop in this.
They have it.
They have it in separate thing. They have under app services. No, not even app services. That they are under analytics.
It's under analytics. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, what they do
Yeah, it's
is
what
they
customers
recommend you
think of it,
store
right?
it in you store it in Dynamo, and then you in Dynamo, and then you use EMR, which is the Elastic MapReduce, to analyze it from there. And you can use the data pipeline to transfer it and create the workflow.
Yeah.
But you store it in Dynamo.
And so if you look at the database segment, we have DynamoDB, Elastic Cache, this is in-memory caching. RDS is classic MySQL, PostgreSQL, Microsoft SQL. All these variations are available in that service.
Thing is, the Elastic Cache is not a database. It's like a middle layer.
In-memory
Middle layer.
cache. In-memory cache for database. Database cache.
Okay,
Cache for
database.
database.
It's not an app cache, it's a
Okay.
database cache.
Okay.
Then you have the Redshift, which is petabyte scale data warehouse solution. So you basically give away your jewels to them, and they'll store it for you.
The Redshift and the EMR are for analytics.
Yep. So you can use the EMR and make them run on your whatever type of storage solution that you have.
Yeah.
And then you have in this here is Kinesis, which is application-specific real-time processing. Like this discussion that have you run an advertisement on some kind of a web property ever? Like put a Facebook ad or a LinkedIn ad or Bing ad, Microsoft or Google ad. Have you done that?
Mm-hmm.
So the expectation you would have from an ad that you place is how much money do I spend and who's seeing the advertisement? Right? And how quickly can I get feedback from that campaign I'm running so I can tweak my parameters better? So I spend not too much money and still target my audience. Now that real-time processing sometimes takes 2 hours for me to place an advertisement and then figure out what's going on, who's looking at my ad, who's clicking on it, and get me the insight so I can tweak my parameters better. Let's say I'm running an advertisement for selling these memories, these SanDisk memories. I want to target the audience that have a computer and are in the age group of, say, college graduates all the way, so 21 all the way through 35. That target group I want to attract and give them this red colored. So I want to tweak the audience that I have and be able to quickly understand who's actually looking at that ad, who is clicking on it, what kind of impressions am I getting, and get that information back quickly is where this thing comes into play, Kinesis.
It's like a Swarm or Kafka
Concept, yes, same concept, but does it faster. I mean, in the Amazon context. If you have data already that you're using it, and it is real-time processing of large data, large-size data, big data streams that is coming into your warehouse or your data store, and you want to analyze that and quickly give back feedback to somebody who's placing, for example, an advertisement. I would like to know if I bid $10 on every click that gets people to come and buy this item from me, because this I want to sell it for more than $10, otherwise I lost money. So how much do I bid? Because I'm selling this for $15 in the market on my site. I want people to come and click on this advertisement I place, and I lost $10 for every click. And the user comes in, lands up on my site, and then he might buy. He or she might buy. So I already lost money. So I need to know how much money is the amount of money I should put so that I can pay per click and have exposure, and I want to see how many clicks are visited, how many exposures am I getting, how many clicks am I getting, and is it really cost effective for me? And doing that on a real-time basis is much more interesting to the advertiser. So companies like Google and Bing and Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter will like to give you that instantaneous or almost instantaneous 2 to 3 second feedback. I click run my ad campaign. I need to know that right away. Who's watching it? How is my ad performing in the market, in the internet? So are people looking at my Facebook inline ad, or are they looking at my ad on the side, which is more attractive? I need to know that right away so I can tweak my parameters much faster. That's where this thing comes into play, this Kinesis. It gives you real-time analytics so that you can serve your customers better and faster.
We use for hotel transactions.
Hotel booking.
Hotel booking, so to check the inventory real time.
Right.
When the inventory is depleting, in the past we used to log this information in a relational database. And the log size is like several terabytes in a given day.
Wow.
And by the time run a query, it takes 2 days to return.
And so
now the real-time application is logging the data directly into Hadoop through Strong. And then you have real-time analytics to send a one message back to the market managers who want that, hey, there's some events are happening. Then you need to.
So they can then price accordingly, or.
Yeah, more negotiation or immediate actions. For example, Vegas and certain
hotel owners
supplies are declining, and we don't want for the customer to see negative inventory or zero inventory. We want to act on them before
they jack the price up.
Or yeah, if you have more inventory, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, if the inventory is running down, you jack the price up to get the money.
Or you could have, if you have more inventory, you have a more better negotiation power with your hotel suppliers.
Essentially, it's a business decision. You want to make it quickly, right?
Yeah.
Any kind of, in case of Expedia, they want to be able to maximize return that they get. So they have their suppliers giving them rooms, giving them a seat in an airplane, giving them rental car agreements, all these things. Actually, hotel, rental car, and airplane tickets. That's what they primarily sell, if I'm right.
Yeah.
I've never visited Expedia, by the way.
Oh my God.
I know. Oh my God. I think that's what you do, because I go to the chipmunk thing, which is
That's
cool.
bad.
I know it's bad, but it's cool. They give me less agony. You know what that means, right?
Yeah.
So agony is they have a mathematical definition of agony. If you haven't figured it out, you should Hipmunk. If you go here and say give me a flight, it will give you sort by agony, like how much amount of money goes out of my pocket.
As well as like if there's a crazy layover, if there's 6
layover times.
legs, or.
So it gives you a comprehensive metric of sort by not just price, sort by not just duration, but sort by agony, which is cool. And that's the reason I go there. That's the only reason I go here.
It's a nice
the sort by agony is nice. So you want to make the decision from a business perspective to be able to negotiate with your suppliers. And you can do that only if you know what you're doing. And the more quickly you know and find out, using tools that are helping you in real-time analytics. This is a hot topic these days in big data and analytics area.
Fraud also they use a heavy.
Yes.
Yep.
So fraud examples, if I can give you some, would be actually in the fraud prevention example, I should say, is let's say if I accidentally expose my credit card number and somebody out there in India is trying to misuse, and they will detect that charge happening through an authorization request coming from India as an IP address from India, an address from India trying to access something on the internet, say buying something from Amazon. They will detect that and it identify as an unusual pattern in my purchase behavior. And then immediately send me a text message that, is that you that did it? And unless you have your system set up in such a fashion to actually alert you in real time, it's lost opportunity for the banks. So banks are very much into making sure that the fraud department or fraud prevention departments are able to act almost real-time basis and in real time decline a transaction. So it has happened to me when I'm trying to buy a ticket for my parents to come here from India, and so buying a ticket for an airline, Lufthansa, and the ticket starts from India and comes here and goes back to India. That's how my parents will travel. And I got rejected. But I'm using it myself from my Sammamish home, and I got rejected.
Right. Well, that's what the reason for that is. Most of them are using, there's like Red and a Certify and a couple anti-fraud platforms, and they just have algorithms that say, we can, we'll give you all this info about the purchaser, and then the retailer, whether it's an airline or it's Expedia or it's whoever, then they say what their metrics should be. They say, okay, well, if you ding on too many items, like you're more than 500 miles away, your billing address versus your shipping address, or your IP address versus your shipping address, or your credit card name doesn't match the traveler, that's another one,
Yes.
things like that, and you ding too many of these things off, then it's not a reject, happens.
Then it's an auto reject after third failure.
I was booking a ticket from India.
Huh.
And what happened? One of the flights got cancelled, Kingfisher, all of a sudden. So I was trying to reschedule it. So first I went to the Indian website, tried to book there. It rejected because I have an American credit card. Then second I went to Expedia.com and I was logging into India from India.
Huh.
It's not allowing me to go into .com. It's taking me to the Indian website.
You can blame Shavel now.
So finally, I said, what to do? And I said, why is AWS there? I logged on to the AWS machines. Booked the ticket through AWS machine.
Wow. That's proxy.
Yeah, that's one way to proxy. Absolutely.
Sweet.
But before the second time I tried to book, I think I got a call saying that the credit card is being misused or something. So I was trying to call the 1-800 number and tell them, otherwise it's.
Unfortunately, they can't do that because when the auto reject happens, they can't go into the software and change it. If they're able to keep the transaction ID, they can sometimes manually adjust it, but it's really hard once they have a system in place to do that. They have to book you by hand rather than reauthorize your existing transaction.
Unless you know your banker, then they'll actually open and let you do any transaction you want. If you are on the phone with them and I tell them I'm going to buy a ticket in India, open the gate, they'll allow you and you can buy a ticket and they'll lock you down. But you need to know the bank. Like I have an account with Credit Union, Pentagon Federal Credit Union, and they'll do it for me gladly, which is nice. But not every bank will do it. So continuing our discussion on this deployment and management. This concept here that we have, cloud formation, templated methods out there for some sample example types of applications that they provide, and you can create your own formation. And this is like a one button, create me something that has Ruby on Rails stack. We will have a cloud formation, a templated AWS resources created for you with one button. That's this cloud formation thing. At the very bottom, what you see here is OpsWorks. And guess what this is? OpsCode implementation on Amazon. So this, by the way, uses the older version of Chef. For some reason, they chose not to talk to OpsCode and decide whatever they want. So they use some older version that they want to keep control of for obvious reasons, which is they want to retain control, as opposed to relying on AWS.
Is that how Chef got started? Is they made their platform for Amazon first? No. It was the other way around.
Yeah. Amazon uses it like this in OpsWorks. Amazon now provides a service.
It's a new service.
Yes, new service just started like maybe 6 or 7 months ago, maybe a little bit more.
Okay.
But OpsCode and Chef has been for about 3 years now, maybe a little more, 3 to 4 years now. It has Chef is also used in Facebook, big time for all deployments. Google uses Puppet for all the IT management, all the machines. So you might have seen, if you see a Google employee and you go ask them to run terminal and say top, in this listing, you will find Puppet D, Puppet Master D running. And that is the Puppet client runs on every Google laptop. That's how Google is managing these machines remotely. Like you will see similar thing in Microsoft PCs also. If Microsoft employees' machines show up, you will probably see some System Center management software elements, SCCM elements showing up and managing these machines for the employees of the corporation. And you can use, as a customer of Microsoft, use the same set of techniques and tools to manage your corporate employee machines, if they are Windows machines, or use other software from other vendors if they are not Windows machines. But concepts apply. You can use these tool sets like we're talking about here, specifically Chef-like tools to manage physical machines, virtual machines, cloud instances. You bring your box and the thing will manage it for you. And you define the outcome, and it will run that outcome for you and maintain it in that state, just like what you want. We also talked about IAM, which is conceptually an Active Directory or LDAP or Open LDAP implementation that all of us, I think we covered last time, right?
Yeah.
Beanstalk, I think some of you already tried. I see murudaguru.com showing Beanstalk example, which you already tried, didn't you? I saw it last time. Murudaguru.
Beanstalk?
Yeah. Murudaguru.com was running Beanstalk. There it is. See?
Your Elastic Beanstalk PHP application is now running.
Do you know this? Did you click some button? I mean, it's just one button. No big deal. I've just clicked, okay, launch, and it launches. You might have clicked the button.
Probably getting, Beanstalk isn't charged, so no, not getting charged.
And he is getting charged. So check your
Well, it's
account.
running the server, he's getting charged, but Beanstalk
He is
itself
getting
isn't
charged.
charged.
I thought you did this.
Your server is running, but Beanstalk isn't charged.
You have EC2 charges coming to you.
Yeah.
So go check your AWS account. There's something running on your machine. Unless somebody hacked your account.
To run Beanstalk for
I don't think
no
so.
reason.
So this website is what is the result of Beanstalk running PHP. You must have clicked the button. I told you I'll tell you which button you clicked. You clicked here.
So it's basically web services.
And yes,
It's-
you
it's a
probably
pass.
clicked PHP and say launch. That's what you did. You hit the blue button.
The cool thing is now they can launch Docker.
You apparently did.
Yeah, you can put Docker containers now on Amazon VMs.
Okay, go check your account. And by the way, if you have an account and you have probably created a bunch of accounts in the variety of services, go back there wherever you put your credit card and kill these machines tonight. Don't waste money.
True. But
Sometimes if you use Beanstalk and you kill the machine, it will regenerate itself.
If you're nervous about setting them up, there's a thing in CloudWatch. You can set up a CloudWatch alert to let you know if anything's running, and have it email you like every hour or however often you want it to do that. But you can set up that alert in CloudWatch.
And so here is CloudWatch, and I have an alert somewhere that emails me whenever my usage monthly bill goes above $6. This is just a test case. My bill is actually $3 to $4 because I don't use much, but I actually do. The services are really cheap. These services.
Back on Beanstalk, I saw that it could launch Docker. Can you talk about the use cases of launching
Yes.
that?
Yes. Yes. So let's discuss
I
the
know it's
concept.
cool, and I think I know why it's cool, but I don't for sure know all the use cases of why it's useful.
Yeah, the topic you bring up is sweet. The idea behind what she's mentioning about is this thing called Docker, and I'll give you a 2-minute version of it. If you look at our folder structure in Linux or Unix, you have these. Let's look at here. It's easier to look here. You have this thing called tree. Right, the file system will show up as a tree with a representation of the root at the top, then you have users, and then you have a person called, say, Muru, and then you have files underneath, and you can have multiple folders like that. And you can go on like this. So this is what a commonly known Unix file system will look like. You've seen this already in directories or folders inside your virtual machine. Now, in case of a container, what this is an implementation of is that it will limit access to anything below the file system. So pick a node in your file system structure. Anything below that is contained as a change in root. So your root becomes here. So you cannot access anything else outside. So all these things outside are not accessible to that particular instance, the container. So it's limited by boundary. That's the concept. Meaning if you have a file system like this, it will look like you are the entire file system, even though you're actually a subset of the bigger picture. You're somewhere here, and it looks like root to you. This concept is called CH root. In old BSD, this is 30 or 40-year-old concept. And you run it in a jail. And by jail, essentially, it means that you cannot get out of it. So the CH root or CH root jail is a well-contained structure in which you load your applications all within the jail, while at the same time using all the operating system resources that you have access to already. So you have all the resources that an operating system will provide to you, except your access to memory and access to hard disk and access to your CPU is limited through constraints. In case of what we saw in virtualization, you get allocated a bunch of CPU, a part of it, some RAM, and some part of your hard disk, some portion of it. You get these allocated and you create a VM like we have here in this example. We have this VM with 1024 MB RAM and 128 MB video RAM and 16 GB hard disk. We have it carved out and dedicated to this guy. Out of a total available hard disk, we have how much we have? Storage, we have about 400 GB total available, out of which this machine, the virtual machine, got only 16. Of total memory available in this machine, we have a total of 8 GB RAM, out of which this machine got only 1024. So we are carving out chunks of the real machine and creating virtual machines. When we create a virtual machine, we have to actually load up an operating system for every OS. Like you might have seen a video on virtualization on this topic already, where I describe that you have the underlying hypervisor and boxes containing virtual machines, each one of them containing an OS here. And the OS can be different types of OSs. And this is the underlying hypervisor. And we can, in case of Amazon, it will be the Zen hypervisor, for example. Or you can have another hypervisor called KVM, which is common in Ubuntu and Red Hat. So you create these containers in form of virtual machines, then you need to load an OS. On the contrary, if you're using a Docker container, you don't need to load OS because you use the OS services that is already there. All you get to use is a container in which you load just your app.
And so the benefit is that the app can crash without crashing the box?
Yeah, with no
Is that what the main benefit is?
The speeding up of creating a container is like 1 second compared to a minute or two in a VM. You can spin up a container in 1 second and load up just the application. So what you load here is your Rails application with your database and your code, and you're up and running.
So instead of one app per VM, you can say, okay, this is a slightly bigger box that can handle two apps, but I don't want them crashing each other, so I'll put them in containers.
They are self-contained, and you can have multiple containers just like that, and put just the app, and there is no need to put an OS here. The OS is the common OS that is already there. Like in case of what we saw in case of virtual machines, you're adding OS and then adding app on top, like you saw me in the earlier example.
So you're reducing the footprint or the overhead, right?
Oh yes. So this is VM and this is call it container for Docker. The key difference being you have a machine which is the hypervisor. Then in these boxes you put OS first and then your app. In here there is the OS and you have containers where you put the app. That's the key difference. You don't need this element. And the drawback is you get only this OS. You cannot get a variety of you cannot get Windows and Linux. You can get it here. You can get only Linux here. No other OS. I mean, there is Core OS available now. Core OS which is Solaris derivative. That is also available, but you cannot get Windows, cannot get Mac.
Would it be a security feature as like to put a container as a honeypot?
I don't know what honeypot would be.
It's where you attract
No,
hackers and hold them.
There's no such issue. No such issue.
No, not an issue. Is that a benefit? Would you use a container on like?
Equal in security aspects.
Okay.
There's no difference as such.
Okay,
There's
gotcha.
no one is not more secure than the other. Security comes from the fact that you leave open-ended holes, and that might cause issues in security. But by itself, the technology itself is secure on both sides. There is no issue there. The speeding up and putting an app container takes a second or two, even faster. When in here, you will take a minute or two or more. So there's recent news. I think Google runs 2 billion containers every week.
Mm-hmm.
That was the news, which is a clear indication of where things are going. Absolutely, it is going in this direction, containerization as opposed to virtual machines. There is another company that I think, I'm not sure you know this or where.
So just so I'm clear, so
Yes.
you're saying instead of virtualization, create containers and throw your app on the container, as opposed to creating a virtual environment and then throwing your app tier, app layer on top of that. That's what you're saying.
Yes. So in here, if you want to run, for example, run WordPress, is your app in this location. You need an OS. You need LAMP, all these elements loaded. In here, your L is here already, the Linux OS, and you have Apache and MySQL and PHP at this layer, and make it available to everybody who's running the app. All you just add is WordPress. You don't have to add any of these elements, because you can assume that the OS is providing it to you. And if it doesn't, you can add it to OS. So if you, for example, say I want MySQL for this app, it becomes available to everybody else. You don't have to multiple install the same application over and over. In case of here, in VM, you run WordPress instance number 1 on this Linux box. You have to have LAMP, all of them. You run Joomla here on this Linux box. You need to run LAMP, all of here, and then put Joomla on top. You want to run Drupal here, you do the same thing. You have multiple installations of the LAMP stack over and over and over.
But does containers get workload isolation features like VMs?
Yes. You can isolate, you
So
know.
that means Linux should have that feature, Apache should have that feature, MySQL should have the feature. Okay.
They do. And so you can control who's throttling how, and you can throttle and define who gets how much CPU consumption, who gets more performance versus the others. You can define that.
Major concern would be the security, right? If someone hacks the
There's
one
That,
piece of code,
if you hack anywhere, that's a hack.
but still in here you have a complete isolation.
Yes, that is correct. That is correct.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Now, this company, which I'm not sure why it's whiteboard. Okay, cancel. And this company is doing VMs on top of VMs. It's a new startup. Run VMware environments in AWS or Google without modifying anything.
from VMware. Oh, that's so slow. Would that be horribly slow?
I think it is going to be slow, and they admit. I talked to them, and they said, yes, it will be a little bit slow, but it will work. And so the benefit here is if you are testing out something, and you don't want to be messing around with your existing machines as is, just go to AWS and run VM on top of VM, which they have. All the AWS machines are Zen.
Yeah.
You can run your exact environment right now as is, take it there and run it there. And apparently the KVM developers are working in this company. So they claim that they know what they're doing.
Put that low. Mm.
And if you look at who the people are, about us. Yeah, these guys, this guy, I think is these two guys are KVM origin people. But this is an interesting concept. I don't know how successful this will actually be in terms of adoption and trends, because on the other trend we saw is Google going to containers.
Yeah, that's. Yeah, I guess that's the discussion now, is if people are going to ditch VMs and go with containers
Probably
as
not.
the new cloud, is what
Probably not.
people are saying.
Probably they might, but some people will, and the people who are not using Linux will not, because they cannot.
Sure.
But some people will, and there are newer startups that I think a friend of mine is visiting your office. You're running a meetup there, right?
We did. Yeah, we
You already did?
Yeah.
Okay. What's the name of this company?
Shippable.
Shippable.
I
So this-
recorded his talk.
Okay.
It's on S3 now.
Woo.
Give us a link. Share us a link. And so this this company, this guy Avi, is a friend of mine, and he created this product essentially. And what they do is provide you containers for your Git repository. So you have a Git, you have your application in a Git repository. You just sign up for their plans and push it to GitHub, and it will install the app in a container for you in Flash, just like that, and run it for you. That is this application. It has to be Linux. It has to be a Dockerized application, and that will run just fine.
Nice UI.
Yep, UI is nice. The application is also nice.
Of course, part of it is they stole it from the Docker UI. The Docker UI is really nice.
Yes.
Their little whale shipping container thing. It's
Yes.
fantastic.
This one.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you. So if you take what we discussed in AWS and the variety of services that they have and compare that with what other people provide, it's very small comparatively speaking. You know, they have, like in case of let's take go into deeper in Google what they offer. If you look at what they offer is Compute Engine, which is similar to EC2. We already saw that last time we created a new instance. You remember me doing this, right? Was it you or somebody else? You. Disks. This is like your EBS based machines. You can create a disk here. And you can in this UI, you can actually create just a disk and do nothing with it. That's a possibility here. You can create snapshots, which is similar to what we had in Amazon. You have established previously saved images or provided images that Debian, they don't have Ubuntu, but they have Debian, they have CentOS, they have CoreOS, which I was mentioning early on, which is the Docker-friendly OS here. And by the way, Debian also runs Docker. Then they have Red Hat Linux and SUSE Linux. So bunch of Linux options, no Windows options here. Network, you can have your firewall rules, very similar. You create a new rule, provide your port you want to open up, and it still did not open for you for some reason, right?
I haven't tried, but yet last time I tried, it did not.
Okay.
But
Then they have ELB in Amazon. They have this thing called load balancing setup, elastic load balancing setup, and all of these people are using this software. It's another open source software, and this is the most well-known load balancing software on the internet. It is called AJ Proxy. The web address is 1wt.eu. But yes, this is the right software, and it is available on a bunch of machines, bunch of platforms, and it is absolutely beautifully reliable, because this is the piece that runs and front ends your application, right?
So can you use Amazon front-end machines with this load balancing?
You can use HA proxy in Amazon, yes.
You can use ELB, which is their version of HA
Yeah.
proxy, and they manage it, or you can load an HA proxy and use it as your load balancer.
Got it.
So
Yourself and you manage it.
use
Just like the databases.
you take Linux box, load HA proxy on an instance, and
yeah.
that becomes your HA proxy load balancer, and then you can put your app servers.
It's a software load balancer.
Yep. Even ELB is software load balancer. That's Amazon already
It's just
provides.
they manage it versus you managing it.
So, the Amazon load balancer will be running in a separate dedicated load balancing machine, I assume, versus HA proxy will be running on your own machine. Is that right?
Yes.
True. But if you use a big enough, one of the tricks is if you're choosing your instance size,
Mhm.
they come in families. Like they say M and they say whatever. If you choose the biggest of a family, you often, not always, but often get your own box.
Okay.
So if you're going to run an HA proxy, you don't want to be competing with network.
Yeah.
Try to run the biggest box in a family. And you want to run as a pair anyway.
Yep.
For redundancy.
So that was the application HA proxy running here in your Google Cloud. Load balancing is the same thing here in case of Google. Metadata is the concept of providing keys, where I have these keys loaded, some sample. The concept of zone is again similar. They have Asia East 1, Europe West 1, and US Central 1. Bunch of different zones. Operations are asynchronous REST requests. I don't know what that means. Operations. I have no idea. This thing is new. Oh, I know what they're doing. They're telling me what I did with it. This is more of I set metadata for this project at that time. That's what it is. It is telling me what I did for every request I make. So on May 11th, which is last month, I set metadata for this user at that time. And the equivalent REST is this.
Yeah, I like that. I like how it spits out. It tells you what the REST
Yes.
command is. I think that's really cool.
Yep. It's a JSON representation of the same data that you have here.
And when you launch from the console, it also gives you an option for the GC
Command line.
util
Yes,
command
that
line
is sweet.
thing, which is pretty sweet. Then you can use those in Chef and whatever, I presume.
Yes, in fact, in Chef you don't use that, but you use something like this. Like you go knife, Google, server, list. It's standardized. They don't want to go.
Oh, it's abstracted?
Yes.
Okay.
Knife,
Are they
Google,
doing it
server,
through
list.
REST or through the GC util?
No GC util. So here, it just connected to Google and told me that I do not have any servers.
Right.
And the same concept applies to knife EC2 server list. Same exact command, no
Right.
difference, except it's dealing with a different set of
I'm just
data.
asking what it's using underneath, if it's using REST or if it's
Fog.
using GCLT.
Fog,
GC.
Ruby gem.
So it's using REST, essentially, then.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I was reading.
This thing.
Yeah.
And another provider, Digital Ocean Droplet List. The same type of interface accesses every type of cloud.
Yeah.
Then you've got this running. And so this is what Chef will interact with these services in different types. Back in here, they have quotas of how many snapshots can I take, what things I can do in every region, and how much can I spend. And then that was the compute engine part, which is conceptually similar to EC2. Then we switch over to this cloud storage, which we saw already. We had a bucket created, not here, here, the Muruguru bucket with this picture. And you can set its permissions and share it out like that. If you compare back with your Amazon and your data services, come on, open it up. Database services, and go back to Google and identify showing. Escape. And here they have cloud database. Again, similar type of services. Nothing is stored because my account is fairly new. But you can create a data entity and start storing stuff in Google Cloud. And you define a namespace. So this is like dealing with a MongoDB style data. You create instances in your namespace and you start loading data in there, which is similar to what you see here in Dynamo. This is conceptually similar. You create a table, you give it a name, create a key, and start adding your data in. And you mostly do these things programmatically. You don't do it by hand in a graphical user interface. But similarly, you do the same thing here in Google Data Store. And for relational store, they have this thing called Cloud SQL, which I think is their, I'm not sure if it's Postgres or MySQL or one of these implementations, but back in Amazon, what you have here is, where did it go? Database RDS. If you look at RDS, it will launch any of these data types, MySQL, Oracle, SQL Server from Microsoft. I think they started Postgres also. So let's launch a DB and see what options we get. And this is essentially what it is doing is, instead of you running your own MySQL on your own box, you run a scalable database here. It's much better, much more reliable, and geographically distributed than running your own MySQL on a little box or even a big box. So it's much better to use this as a database service. The database as a service in the cloud is much more resilient compared to you running your own database. Mm-hmm. Of course, when you're starting an app, it's a good idea to just start your own local database, use it thoroughly, and then go sign up for these kind of bigger services. You can do similar thing here. Like in case of Google, you can choose your region and select your database 5.5 or 5.6, not too many choices, but you get what you have. So you can choose 5.5 MySQL and sign up, essentially. And back in here, you have a lot more choices. You can get MySQL, or get Postgres, or get Oracle database of 3 different types, or get the Microsoft database. And each one of them has a sticker price. And so.
And you can bring your own license for Oracle or for MySQL or MS SQL,
Microsoft,
or you can do it per hour through them.
That's pricing. They define it here, which is RDS pricing, so you can see how much they charge for a standard DBM3 medium size with that CPU. And where is the price? Dollar numbers. Okay, here.
Down below.
Here. So the per hour pricing for a variety of sizes, and multi-AZ has a different price apparently. Where is multi-AZ?
Scroll down more, or might be a different tab.
Medium utilization.
Medium, heavy.
Heavy utilization.
That's for RIs. It should be for single AZ,
multi-AZ.
multi-AZ.
You can multiple availability zones.
It'll handle the replication between basically the AZs, or what they call the data centers. And so it does all that for you, and it'll fail over automatically for you. So you, again, just stuff you don't have to manage.
What do the AZ stands for?
Availability zone.
Basically translates to data center.
Okay, multi-data center.
Right.
Within a region.
Within a single region, right. A region is like Seattle, multiple data centers within Seattle that are called availability zones, and then multi-region would be Seattle and Virginia.
You see your regions in the console here of our segment, right? Here you see the region, and as you go and select a machine, it'll ask you, do you want a specific AZ or you don't care? Most of the time you don't care. It doesn't matter to you whether it's building this or building that. You know.
But if you're trying to do things that are replicating to each other,
You want to.
then you want necessarily the same AZ.
If you want to have redundancy across multiple different data centers, even in the same region, you can get that by consciously choosing it.
And they have a real fast fiber ring that just connect, dual fiber rings that connect all the data centers.
Then they on Google side, they have a BigQuery as a separate entity, and this is, they'll store the data and you just query it. And I have nothing. I don't have data to actually demonstrate these things to you in here. And let's now visit the other guys, Rackspace, see what they have. Comparing again with what these people offer. And so at the top level, you will see what they're offering here is cloud servers. This is conceptually similar to create EC2 instance or create a cloud instance, create a machine for me. Back to server, you have saved images. If you take a snapshot, it shows up here. In the same context of creating SSH keys, you can add your key and make it available in any region you like. You define block storage, which is, block storage is similar to your EBS volumes. You create a volume and make it available in any region and choose the type, whether you want a standard disk or a SSD disk. And choose the size and keep it available for your machines that you want. When you take snapshots of these storage objects, they become visible here through this interface. They also have this concept of auto scaling, which is similar to Amazon has an auto scaling function built in. Where is that?
I don't think it's a separate feature.
Yeah, it's I think built into
EC2. It's part of CloudWatch and EC2.
It's not called out here, but they do have auto scaling abilities. If you, I think it will be in your Beanstalk. That does scale automatically. So the idea behind Beanstalk essentially is that it will scale for you as you select a plan, launch a platform. If your needs grow, this will scale up automatically for you. And you can do the same thing in your OpsWorks also. That also allows you to scale. If you go to OpsWorks, you can even define a stack and add layers and layers to your architecture and carve out what kind of a blueprint you want from an applications perspective in OpsWorks from Amazon. Back to Rackspace, they also offer big data, which is conceptually similar to EMR or Elastic MapReduce or Hadoop in what you saw here in Amazon.
The only difference in this case offer only the Apache version of Hadoop. Amazon offers the MapR version of them.
Yep. I think honestly the variety of choice of services you get from here is the best today. You can see it as you compare and contrast as what we have.
But the main thing missing here across all the forwarders is not for someone to run analytics business. ETL is missing. BI tools are missing. So I have a database, I have big data. How do I move the data? How do I process the data? ETL tools are missing. And then BI tools, how do I visualize the data?
Yeah, that is not in the cloud providers.
So I have someone called BI as services, BIAS. So they have all kind of analytics tools on the cloud. You can pay per use.
Mm-hmm. The data pipeline is your ETL.
No, that's data transfer. I'm talking about data transformation.
The transformation.
Yeah.
They don't have that yet. That was supposed to be out. Where did that go? I thought.
But if you go to Informatica offers.
Yeah, Informatica and the other Seattle company, you have Tableau software. Those guys do these kind of things.
But they're not part of these.
No, not here. Not here.
Yeah.
They're their own solutions.
Yeah.
Not here yet. Yep. True. We were at Rackspace, so big data.
You can do ETL on AWS though.
Not what he wants. So he
I wanted
has
to do data
To break into
aggregation,
chunks into.
data duplication, data.
he has a specific need. He was describing to me. I want to understand it better.
Sure. I can show some examples.
Yep. So apart from dealing servers in Rackspace, they also have this concept of files. They call it cloud files, and this is very similar to S3. You create a container as opposed to creating a bucket. It's a container, and you create a container, say test, and you mark it private or enable CDN, or create a they started offering static websites here. So now they offer a static website. So you can create a container in Rackspace and make a static website out of it. And use a container to host a static website, upload an HTML file called index.html to set as your index page, add a domain name by going to a domain host and setting up a CNAME to your CDN URL, and you're done. Which is beautiful. They also offer DNS services. I think this part is free. I haven't made use of it though. But I think they give these DNS services for free. And my DNS is not here, although I have entries here, but it's not active. Yeah. StableTransit.com is their name servers. Then in load balancer, of course, they have load balancer services similar to what we saw before in HA proxy, again implemented here. Databases. Create instance and see what we get. We get different memory sizes and essentially getting MySQL. Not much. And here you can configure your username and password for the database access itself. But the cool thing here is that you are not supposed to be managing your database hardware. You're not managing the machine that is running your MySQL. They are managing it for you. So it's a database as a service as opposed to running your own database on an instance. Provide backup services, some queuing services. Queuing services are similar to what Amazon offers here, which is simple queuing service. And you can create a queue, and this queue is essentially publish, subscribe queue. Message queuing. That's the same idea here, but implemented on a large scale, so you can use it for within your application, creating a queue of things to do, and then using that as an element. You can take one item at a time and process it and call it done, or maybe put in a second queue if you want. And so these guys seem to have that queue separately created. Then they have more. This thing is called Mailgun, which is similar to what we talked about last time, SES.
Yes.
Or we talked about, what was the example I used? Forget.
Mandrill.
Mandrill, or SendMail. No, not SendGrid. SendGrid, Mailgun, and Mandrill are transactional email engines similar to Simple Email Service from this Simple Email Service. All they do is send out emails on port number 25. So you have an email that you create and ask Amazon to send it for your customers for transaction, that somebody logged in, this happened, that happened. Any such notification that shows up goes from here or from Mailgun. And they also have these other things called Object Rocket, which is a fancy name for MongoDB deployment. Nice to have a rocket in your name. Then featured partners. So they are featuring RightScale as a partner. I hope RightScale works today. That day it was, for me, it was in some kind of a migration, not marketplace. What am I? RightScale. Let's see if I have something. I don't think I have anything here yet. Down for maintenance. How many days will you be down?
I think you need to migrate your stuff, is what they were trying to say earlier.
Currently available, unavailable. Containing the account may be down due to maintenance or other issues. I have to contact them to figure out what's going on. And that's what Rackspace did. Let's compare the HP Cloud and see how little they do.
How many years they are in the business?
HP is maybe 2 to 3 years.
Okay.
But Helion is like 2 weeks old. So I'm expecting them to have more, but not really. So yeah, I gave them grief. They haven't implemented full OpenStack capabilities. All they have is DNS service. So we saw Route 53. They have it here. DNS. This is not like Route 53 by any shape or imagination, but just see what it shows and what it does. So you can create a domain, and once you have a domain record, you can create all these records: A records, TXT records, CNAME records, MX records, all the types of records that we created in AWS. Similar thing here, available. Go back to the project itself. How do I go back to my home page where I came from? Yeah, there it is. They have 2 regions, East and West. And in those regions, we have a variety of things available only in some regions, like RDBMS with MySQL is available only in the West region, not in the East yet. They have compute in both regions. Object store, which is like S3-like thing, or where you store your objects, available in both regions. So you can go to object store and put your create a container and put your object there. You call it container, mark it private or public, and off you go. And you put a bucket, put your object inside the container. They don't call it bucket. It's a container as opposed to a bucket. It's a folder, essentially, where you have files. But so that's this. The only new thing that they're developing is a load balancer.
Wow.
Wow.
State of the art.
And it's in beta. So we can access beta.
And my friend at HP wondered why I didn't want to go sell HP.
Exactly.
Like, oh, so what? How do you compare to Amazon? Well, we're HP. I mean, come on. HP is it's a brand.
The UI is
What's Amazon? It's just a place to sell books. They don't know nothing about.
So you know what HP's logo is?
HP invented nothing in the last 20 years. Yes, that.
This is HP invent. Actually, the way is.
Well, we should say
Copy and purchase.
We should say Microsoft on the top of the list.
Don't say Nilesh, okay? Do not say Nilesh. As long as that is okay, I'm fine with you, man. It gives me hard time for I don't know why.
Microsoft on the list.
Oh my God.
Well, you actually haven't showed us how these all compare with Azure.
The whole person.
Exactly.
You want to?
I'm just saying you haven't.
I'll do it. I'll do it. The problem is I don't want Shahar to give me hard time. Don't give me grief. I'll show it to you.
He runs Mac and Linux for Pete's sake. It's not his fault.
See, she knows.
This UI is better than Office 365, by the way.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I'm
What?
It's a better user
Better
interface.
than Office
See,
365.
then when I asked him to sign up for Office 365, he had a hard time finding the link. That's why he's giving me grief.
No, to configure the email service, it took 2 days for me.
See?
Amazon, it took 2 minutes.
I haven't done that.
Oh, okay. Good luck.
Hey, I've cleared all the settings of DNS at Amazon. I deleted my old file.
Managed other sure. It doesn't work.
I don't know why the Beanstalk is there. I've checked my billing, there is no billing, nothing.
I'll take a look. Your site is up and running though.
You had
Oh, I
to see
deleted
too.
You deleted that?
Yeah, yeah, everything.
Okay, good.
Well, then you're fine. As long as your servers are down, you don't have a Beanstalk. Then.
Yeah, went back to GoDaddy servers for at least a day. I'll do that till I come back to tomorrow.
But you know what? Check again. If you're running Beanstalk at least once, it regenerates your machine images on its own.
No, I mean there's nothing there. It's saying 000. My billing is still 50 cents. Only
If
for
you
the
go to
billing.
Beanstalk, is there anything to build?
No,
Then you're fine.
that's what shocks me.
Check again tomorrow. Don't give it up. I've seen in the past students in this class getting hit by a bill month after they stop their Beanstalk. Because
I
it
don't
regenerates.
know
Just go and check again tomorrow. That's all I'm saying. Good.
Thanks.
All I'm saying is check.
I never bothered to use my URL. I haven't determined it. What will be the
So they give credits if you are a subscriber to the BizSpark program. So there is some credit that you get free machines. Make use of that. Like everybody else is giving $300 HP Cloud, $1,500 at Google Compute Engine, and Amazon does
Free too.
free tier, tiny little free tier for 1 year. So and DigitalOcean gives you $10, something like that. So everybody has their own flavor of how much they give, but those who have less will give more. Kind of strange. So Amazon does give nothing, at least to me. I get nothing free, and I pay them.
They have no nonprofit discount and no student discounts, nothing. They're just.
In fact, I should actually formally apply them for an education discount for the class, because I don't want the class to pay for it. Right? I can eventually get that, but for now, you're paying for it or whatever you use in the class. So let's see what Microsoft Azure, with a new name called Microsoft Azure as opposed to Microsoft Windows Azure.
Oh, okay.
Yes, it's not Windows Azure anymore. It's
Because they
Microsoft
have
Azure.
Linux.
And so the machine I run,
They had Linux before too.
Sorry?
They had Linux before too. They call Windows Azure.
They're still trying to be agnostic.
so that's why the name Windows went away from Azure, is that they want to communicate that they are agnostic, is that they do all sorts of OS, like Linux, for example. And so at the very top on the left corner, what you see here is websites. And you have no websites created. And this is, think of it as what we will discuss the next time we meet, is platform as a service. And we'll deal with a bunch of different varieties of platforms available to us in the cloud. We'll walk through, and this is one such example here, where you essentially what you do is create a website. And what it does is lets you quickly create something or custom create something that you want, or choose from a gallery. So we'll go to the gallery portion to highlight something, choose from a gallery, and let's see what gallery applications we have. If you have a .NET-based CMS called Composite C1 that I don't even know what that is, or if you have Drupal running, you can just click this button and have Drupal up and running. So ready-made software for you to use. If you want to run an empty site with .NET, you click this button. It will give you a platform for you to deploy your .NET sites in this location. If you have some other, like Cake PHP as a CMS or web application, it will give you that platform. If you want to run Python applications and have a framework already loaded, you use Django. You have, I think they'll have Rails also somewhere. Or you want to run Joomla, here it is. You want to run MediaWiki, which is like Wikipedia, you click this button. You have Node.js empty site, so you can run Node applications, JavaScript-based Node applications on the back end as well as front end here by clicking that button. Other choices, WordPress Japanese package. So bunch of different solutions, app frameworks. You can, variety of frameworks for applications, some content management systems that we saw just now, e-commerce capabilities built into a variety of software like Drupal Commerce or Mojo Portal, Virtual Commerce. So these are giving you shopping carts. So you create your products, you put a price, create inventory, how much inventory you have for each product, and you automatically get a storefront using this kind of software. So this same concept applies to all these, like Drupal Commerce Starter Kit. So you start Drupal and then have this e-commerce framework loaded, and then you create your stock keeping units of things you sell. And for every item you sell, you have a quantity and a price in your inventory, and you load it up, and it exposes like a storefront, becomes Amazon.com, and then you buy.
So you don't need a software developer at some point.
No, we'll soon reach a point that most of it is already prepared for you. So you can just load your elements that you want to sell. So if I want to sell this memory stick and this pen, I can just say I have 20 of these and 5 of these. I can load inventory and put a sticker price. It creates a shopping storefront for me in this framework. So I can get Drupal e-commerce set up and then hook that up with this thing which is payment as a service. So, which essentially what it does is if you sign in, this is how I collect payment on. This is how I collect payment on websites, which is like PayPal. Like PayPal will enable you to sell products and services and collect money through PayPal as a vendor. Stripe will also do that, but through a much better interface. It doesn't take you to paypal.com and does it right within your site.
Thanks.
So what it does is, let me just show it to you as opposed to talk about it. And what it does is gives you a test bed. So here I'll go say, where is my test bed? And in the test bed, you can see that account settings, and I can basically get an API key. Where are my keys? Yeah, here. Yeah. So here you hit the button, get the keys, and you load it up in your application back in something like this. So in Drupal Commerce or some other types of commerce software, Magento, and even in WordPress, there are places where you can just import your keys from Stripe, give it to this application, it becomes your storefront, and automatically enables anybody to use a credit card, like Visa, MasterCard, American Express, and have your store ready, up and running. The least amount of effort that you want to spend. You can create forums so people can participate and do discussion groups. Online forums can be created with one button. Galleries, picture galleries, like Gallery Server Pro, for example, and more tools and more stuff. A variety of media wikis, your Wikipedia. You can create your own private Wikipedia if you like here. So that was the aspect of websites. Now this is called virtual machines, and this is very similar to EC2. You come here and you start a machine, and let's do it. So new. And here I choose from gallery of machines that I have already, and I'm going to choose a machine image. And I get a choice of Windows R2 Data Center 2012 or Windows 2008. Or if you keep scrolling down, you get all varieties of operating systems, in some running, other things like JDK, Microsoft BizTalk Server, Oracle Enterprise Server, Oracle Database Server, a bunch of different software, Visual Studio Professional. Why are they running Visual Studio in the cloud? Maybe they have a reason. Oh, it's the server side of it. And then we have, you can configure SharePoint. So ready-made SharePoint trial runs up, and you can then add your license to it to make it full-fledged functional. You can run SQL Server, pre-configured instances, BizTalk Server, Dynamics CRM applications that you can run ready-made. And if you want to run Linux, that is also available. CentOS, SUSE Linux, Oracle Linux, Puppet Labs, ready-made machine from Puppet. So you basically this becomes your Puppet master, or the central analogous example in Chef would be Chef Server. And so since you do not have Chef here, what I ended up doing is, oh, did I close it? I think. Did I close by accident my account? Where's the portal?
Still shows up as Windows Azure.
I know. The URL changes and branding changes. Marketing people change something and the engineers haven't picked up.
That's a DNS change.
Yeah, the
No,
engineers will do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually a DNS change.
And from inside, the DNS doesn't work properly.
So on VMs, what you will see is that I have a running machine, and that is running Ubuntu, and I have installed Chef on it. And there it is. So I can now log in to my Chef server. And this is running on Azure like a machine, pretty much like EC2 or compute servers from any other provider. So it's just machines, VMs. That's what you get on this location. Then they have some other services for mobile. So if you're doing mobile application development, they have specific backends ready. So you get a SQL database or a full-fledged new SQL database as opposed to a free one. And then you can choose your region and you choose your language you want to interact with through the phone, through the mobile application. You want to interact with the database on the back end. That's what this is. So you write a custom application on your mobile devices like Windows phones or Android phones or iPhones and have that interact with some back-end database, and that is this database that interacts with your mobile app. Then they have cloud services, which are my services running on my own virtual machine. Also a SQL database, so you can create a SQL database just like we have seen in the case of.
Are they still doing something weird that you can't migrate your existing SQL over because you're doing something funky?
I don't know. I think the funkiness is probably gone, but I don't know.
Okay.
The only choice that you have here is MySQL. Sorry, Microsoft SQL, which is the hold on. New SQL Server data. Yes, that's the only choice. You get a name, call it my database, and you create the size you want. You choose the region you want. Oh, this is probably, what is this thing? Collation, database collation. So you choose the language collation pattern you want, and then you start it. That's the database part. Now storage is very similar to S3. Very, very similar.
Well, just going back on the database, you said they only support Microsoft SQL?
I think so.
I heard they started supporting Oracle.
Not as a service. They're providing you machines.
They're letting you run it if you want. You operate it. You manage it yourself, but not as a managed service.
So we saw that here, right? We go create a new image, and we can create a from gallery, go to database. We saw Oracle here. That is there. But then you have the responsibility of managing and maintaining your virtual machine, as opposed to in this example, which is a database as a service.
Okay.
So here, it's a database as a service. You're not running. You're not responsible for maintaining that machine. They'll do it for you. In storage, it is similar to your S3 concept.
Well, Azure's, as I think, it's not really an IaaS.
Infrastructure as a service,
Yeah.
this part is.
It does do it now. It historically was more of a PaaS, but now it is an IaaS.
So this element is exactly EC2, like very much.
You can run Linux machines. You can, yeah.
I think this is about
That's
Hadoop
their-
clusters.
What they do thing.
And they have this service bus concept that I do not understand.
That's like a middleware we saw in the Rackspace, right?
I think that's what it is. I have never used it, so I do not know this thing.
The message queues.
Yeah,
You
MQ.
know the concept of enterprise service bus?
Yes.
Like, so you just don't know the particulars of this?
Yeah, this particular implementation I've never used.
Okay.
And I accidentally closed the window again.
I just hypothetically slap all kinds of applications on them that all talk to each other. Hypothetically.
I've never used that particular element in Windows Azure. So that was a quick rundown on comparison across the board on what's going on. It's a variety of providers. Do we have other things besides Service Bus? Yes. There is Visual Studio Online, which means that you can run, go to visualstudio.com and create an account for you It is free for you to use Visual Studio Online, and you use storage for your code, like GitHub. Pretty much like GitHub, but this is from Microsoft. And they'll give you online access to Visual Studio. You can edit code, and if you have local Visual Studio installed, you can hook it up to it. You can do a Git push from Visual Studio to visualstudio.com. Git. Yes, you can do it now. It was not there, but I think about 6 or so months ago, they announced that Microsoft now supports Visual Studio Online with Git. And if you have latest updates to Visual Studio, you can see Git right there in the upper right corner. This cache is Redis cache, which is another open source cache, like database cache that we saw in the other examples. BizTalk services are custom software from Microsoft BizTalk, and they have these services available. Some disaster recovery services. CDN, we talked about CloudFront. You can create a CloudFront-like endpoint, like here, and have the origin assigned to a server or a S3-like element. These are 2 S3 buckets I have, or S3-like buckets I have, and I have a server running. What it basically means is you can front end, have the CDN give a front end to any of these objects. It can be either the buckets that we have in our S3-like storage, or can be a server that you create. And that becomes a CDN solution from Microsoft. They have a scheduler which is similar to a collection of jobs that you schedule at a given time. Another service, a portal for API management. Cron-like. Yeah, they have this concept of, in Windows they have concept of AT or at. Like cron, you can run at this time, do this. Yes. Networks, so you can configure your virtual networks inside Windows Azure, identifying traffic manager profiles, network management services, and the best implementation of Active Directory is right here. Really good implementation. And I have my directory functioning. So in here, I think you had a question a while ago, can you set up an Active Directory? Yes, you can, just like this one button. And what you can eventually do is, this will slow people down if you do not have any other local Active Directory, but you can use this service to log on to domains in the cloud. But it will slow things down dramatically.
You're typically not accessing it constantly.
You will, if you're using that as the directory server, as the primary domain controller.
But you typically, you're doing it after you log onto a service or a machine or
Yes.
device or something.
It's like the IAM that we saw in Amazon.
You're not constantly doing it as you're
No, only when you're authenticating yourself
right
at that time.
So
But it's not just once a day or once a session, because oftentimes you're hopping on the VPN, and then you're hopping on SharePoint, and then you're hopping on
gets a
something
token every
else.
time.
Like, it can slow you down a lot if you have to keep hopping on different things, and each thing has to authenticate you.
So I just saw something that was unique.
Applications are leveraging Active Directory for their permissions. Like if it's an application that's using a call every time, then that's problematic too.
Anytime you put your fingerprint or authenticate yourself, it is going to be an Active Directory call. Any authentication, log into any site, any service, accessing a resource away from your machine, it will be an authentication call.
that directory integration, is that talking about up on the top, or is it talking about federating with your local AD?
I think I'll have to read. I do not know. They just refreshed it. In fact, you just saw a
Verified for
notification.
directory sync, so yeah, it looks like it's integrating with
Let's
existing.
let's revisit this topic next time we talk about that you want to talk specifically about this. So maybe we should have a side conversation on this topic. Yeah.
I seem to be the only one who's interested in
Active Directory.
Azure
I guess
Microsoft, but that's
I guess I guess
That's
you,
what the
industry
90%
wants.
of the world, the business world runs.
big time.
So
Makes
like it or not, I
sense.
need to know it.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And we'll have a separate session just for you on this with you and me. And there are some add-ons that you have not purchased anything from the store, and settings and account preferences and all that good stuff. And they also have this concept of keys and certificates. Same thing, or similar thing, different kind of certificates, but we will. You will generate them. If you have an account, you will generate the certificates as you set up the account. They'll give it to you so you can store it locally and then interact with any Azure services through terminal or through command line. That's a quick rundown on Azure.
They have a big data support on Azure.
Yes, HD Insights.
Okay. So that's running on Windows.
Yes, I think Hortonworks is what I understand.
Yeah, they have a partnership.
I think that's what this thing is, probably.
That e-commerce portion, that was actually pretty slick. I like that.
And that is not unique to them, by the way.
Yeah.
You can do this anywhere you like. The beauty comes from the fact that, let's say, WordPress commerce. So just taking an example. The WordPress has a ton of e-commerce plugins, and this is one of the good ones. And it is free and open source.
WooCommerce?
WooCommerce. And what this does is exactly what we discussed in the case of Azure. So it's not unique to Azure, but the beauty comes from open source. People like this WooCommerce is a Europe, I think London or UK-based group that develops this plugin for WordPress that lets you set up your own commerce storefront. So the beauty comes not from cloud services, but from applications. That's one. If you go to Drupal and look at Uber Commerce, versus Uber Cart. There are two solutions competing, both open source, both run on Drupal, and Drupal runs the whitehouse.gov website.
Yeah.
Yes. Don't go to whitehouse.com. Caution.
Did they fix that yet?
Yeah, I thought
No, I don't know. I don't want to know. Don't go there.
I don't think that.
Do not go there. Whitehouse.gov. Remember, gov. So
Oh, they fixed that.
whitehouse.gov. This site is Drupal site.
Yeah, they bought it, and it doesn't do anything. It's just,
You tried it. I did not have
it's
the
not
courage.
porn anymore.
I did not have the courage to go there.
It's the one website on the internet that's not.
It's the one, yeah, and it's officially not porn anymore.
It's amazing, crazy. So this is Drupal implementation, and you can run Uber Cart or Drupal Commerce, any of these two plugins, on top of Drupal, and you can run Drupal anywhere you want to run LAMP. And as a really strenuous or difficult exercise, you can read this post. It's really boring, but if you can, read that. And if you can implement it, you don't need this course.
not follow.
Don't even have anything there. It's the blog dot. If you're able to complete this exercise, you don't need this course. And it's published. Go give it a shot.
So that's our homework for tomorrow, for Wednesday?
It's mind-numbing.
What is the name of the exercise?
It's running a LAMP stack through Chef. So we'll do this slowly, step by step, one by one. It's my website. It's my blog.
Yeah.
This I wrote, I think,
Oh, I see.
2012. So it's an old blog. Most of these entries are probably wrong by now. So that's why it's one of the more complications. It will be wrong. It will not work for you.
Oh,
So that's why it's more difficult.
so I shouldn't try to do it.
No, don't.
Gotcha.
No, you can try.
Thanks.
So
Go back.
the beauty really comes from open source software, not from cloud service. or third service are containers where you put stuff. The stuff has to be good for it to make it interesting. So you can then take the same Stripe API keys and give it to Drupal Commerce or Uber Commerce or WooCommerce and have your shopping cart up and running with your products being sold in one day, live, on any host you want to pick and choose. Like DreamHost will let you run Drupal Commerce with or WooCommerce for, what's the pricing they have? I think $200 for 3 years, something like that.
How much?
$200 for 3 years. Some ridiculous pricing. DreamHost hosting
Which one?
coupon. See that? $3 a month, and they'll give you unlimited storage and unlimited everything, and let you run unlimited number of sites also. It's painfully slow occasionally because it is shared, but you can do it. There are people who do that. So you can run one of these things and get a coupon, and there are certain times you can get for $1 for a full year. But that's not a good idea to go that way. You know, it's a shared hosting location. You don't necessarily want to go there after attending this class. You would rather find another way of managing your infrastructure so you remain in control and get the performance you expect, as opposed to go shared hosting. This is what most people end up doing. They go to GoDaddy, buy a domain, they get a service. That's what they get sold. So GoDaddy is another example. They sell add-on shared host services. These are the things that they sell for throwaway price, throwaway cost to them, but they'll charge you $10, something like that. So the beauty again comes from open source, not from a cloud provider. All of them are equally good, or rather equally bad. It's the software. That's what runs and really works. So we are 3 more minutes. Any specific questions? Or for next time we will discuss platform as a service. We'll go over Heroku. So make sure you have an account there. Heroku, I think you know this name. If not, sign up. Free account. Free forever account. You get one Dino free, perpetually running, 24/7. One Dino is little too small, but it works. We'll use Red Hat OpenShift. Create an account there also. Also free. 3 gears free, not just one. 3 free, perpetually running. And yes, you can run Jenkins here with one click. So public pass, sign up for free, no cost. Don't even have to give credit card here, any of these sites. Then we'll also look at your Google App Engine, which is a PaaS platform as a service, where you don't have to worry about underlying infrastructure, but you load your app and it will manage it for you. It will scale it up and down, and you have to provide your credit card here. They will not let you go inside without a credit card.
What is Amazon's competition?
Very small. Don't even have to worry about it. Unless you run something, they'll not charge it, and you're not going to run it. You're not going to exercise it so that you get a bill.
That was what I saw that.
You should get an account for this.
Just access it through there.
So that,
Developers Google.com and Redshift.
yeah, so Google App Engine is the platform as a service. Google Compute Engine is like a EC2, infrastructure as a service. We are looking right now at Google App Engine. This is OpenShift from Red Hat, and it is free 3 gears. The pricing, let's check what pricing it is. Free for up to 3 small gears. So take that. No credit card needed, and it will run. One gear will run WordPress. The other gear will run some other tool set you want, or just unused, or you can scale. And the third gear can run Jenkins for you if you like. And if you don't use them, they'll kick you out. They want you to use it. So if you don't use them, like I haven't used my account here, they said you're Jenkins is now going to expire. And I said, okay, bye. So it died. But it works if you have to keep using it. And this thing is Heroku. I don't know what it means, but it's a beautiful service. I think it is one of the best platform as a service available. And we will take a Ruby Rails example, create it here, and load it in Heroku next time.
And what's interesting too is Heroku actually runs on top of Amazon.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
So you're building a PaaS, they do the interface, but you don't see the under thing. They handle everything underneath it, which is AWS.
So what is the Amazon's competitive product for Heroku?
Beanstalk, kind of. They don't really keep it up that much.
Amazon doesn't worry about platform too much. They were focused more on infrastructure as a service and some add-on services. But they have services. Let's compare that. Where is it?
It's
Here.
Beanstalk, basically.
Yes. Yes, it is Beanstalk.
Yeah. Oh, you just had it.
Services, Beans.
It's on there.
Here. So here you can choose your platform. What applications do you want to run today? So I choose PHP and I click launch and I'm done. Because now I get a platform ready, scalable platform, goes up and down with my demand, and I get a charge on my credit card.
Okay.
And I can run my applications. I don't need to worry about machine and memory and hard disk and anything else. All I do is load my apps. Application only. Application data, database only. No database server, no machine needed, no nothing needed. So that's the concept we have in.
And then Acquia, they do Drupal.
Acquia is Drupal as a service.
Yeah, which also runs on Amazon.
AQUIA. ACQUIA
Yeah.
is Drupal available as a service. And Acquia is actually created by this guy, Dries, who is the creator of Drupal software. So he's the founder of this Acquia company, which created Drupal. And ma.tt is the guy who created WordPress.
That's great.
His website is ma.tt. Matt Mullenweg. What happened to his site? It changed. But that's not Matt. That's Steve Jobs. But he created WordPress and he runs WordPress.com as a service, as a company. WordPress.org is the open source software. You probably saw these things, me talking about it in a video. If you're looking at me funny, that means you haven't watched those videos. So please go and watch those. There are a lot more videos than you ever wanted to watch.
There's a lot of them.
Go watch them. They'll disappear.
They're good.
I don't know. You tell me what is not good. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you.
So thank you. Next time we'll talk platform as a service and do some hands-on, take our Ruby on Rails, take it to Heroku and put our domain there. So get ready to remap your domains to Heroku next time. We'll keep shuffling our murudaguru.com to various locations.
There you go. It comes back to good as you go.
Hey, some of you need to give me paperwork. That's Muru. And Shahul. He just left.
So, what day? The old day?
19. Thank you.
19 June?
19 May.